welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I'm your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFL review. And ladies and gentlemen, the gather round has come, it has gone. Fantastic footy, but just as much going off the field. So we got to talk about it. And joining me, my friendly South Australian who currently finds himself in the beautiful Pasadena, California, Mr. David Werner of the Creed podcast. David, great to see you, sir.
Great to see you again as well, Donnie. I think this is the third time we've done this, and it's always fun. And usually we end up with plenty to talk about as well, which this weekend has certainly provided that. I don't even
Well,
know where to look with all the issues that have popped up this weekend, good and bad.
Well, your home state again had a wonderful gather round. I have to say, I enjoyed the footy,
Oh, yeah.
and yes, I agree with you. There's tons to talk about, so let's not waste too much time. Let's jump right into it. Before we go game by game, just your initial thoughts of gather round, round four. How marvelous was the footy?
It was incredible. It's kind of funny because it started with we had Melbourne Crows on the Thursday night, which last year was a real celebration for the Crows. This year, not so much. But it started with a couple of kind of dire games. I mean, Crows Melbourne one was close in the end, but always felt like the Melbourne were just kind of just holding on to the end quite professionally as they're doing. Um, pretty one-sided Friday night game, but then it really once the weekend got going, you got some close games, you got controversy, and it really kind of built through the weekend for the crescendo with that final Hawk Collingwood game.
Mhm.
And just, I don't think the script writers of the people that are organising Gather Around and Premier Peter Malinauskas and the AFL and everyone involved could have asked for it to kind of go better in that sense. It
Mhm.
was really a great celebration for the state. Great football on show. A beautiful weekend of weather too. The weather was just perfect all weekend. I think the rain held off until I think it rained in Adelaide yesterday, so it held off
Mhm.
perfectly for the weekend. But um, yeah, just great footy, and anything. If you're a footy fan going to all of the games, you would have got a bit of everything. You would have got some class displays and dominant displays, and then some real good arm wrestles as well.
Yeah, except for literally, I was just double checking it. If you take the Friday games out, every game was decided by less than 5 goals. So
Mm,
you got exciting footy. I mean, like
yeah.
I said, the two Friday night games, unfortunately, 70 and 69. So you're talking 11 to 12 goals and 12 goals basically. So I mean,
Mm,
unfortunately, those Friday night games kind of skewed it a little bit. But in all, I agree with you. Some cracking footy. So we'll jump in game by game. I know as the Power fan, there's a little grin that's probably going across your face as you see your SA rivals fall to Melbourne 78-63. But I mean, again, I know this is a power fan, and I know this may be a pile-on, but the Crows, I don't know what is wrong, but this Crows team, they just look like they're rudderless. They just everything that was working for them last year just, I mean, is not this year.
mm. Yeah, their ball movements really slowed down through the middle. Like they really were able to move the ball and get good forward line, like just forward line pressure. And I think there was signs last year that there could be a little bit of regression because it was just a vintage Taylor Walker year last year at his age last year, and he kind of became a centerpiece to that forward line and was so dominant. I think he got he did get an All Australian jacket last year, and he kind of led by example was for the forwards down there, and helped bring Darcy Fogarty on, as well as obviously Rankin coming in as well, and they just kind of fed off of each other and had a good and just this year. Obviously, Texas, I think he's had a back issue through the offseason or something of that nature.
Mhm.
So he's underdone. Obviously, he's 33, 34 now, so he's not probably long for this league at this point. And just with that small factor, and then the midfield balance they don't seem to have right either, and they're just stagnant. They're a complete opposite. They don't move the ball through the middle of the field well. They don't have the quite kind of the right ball users in the right places at times as well. And so Dawson's probably he's not being used as well because he's having to cover for some other place positions out
Mhm.
there, and some of their older players, like I think Brody Smith was getting a bit of crap from some of their fans a couple of weeks ago, which he's been an absolute stalwart for them. But they're just not
Mhm.
getting those performances out of the veterans, nor are they getting them exactly out of the youngsters either. So it's all just coming together to be a bit of a it's just a shit sandwich, really. And I say that completely objectively. Obviously, I'm a Port fan, and
Mhm.
the famous saying, I go for Port and any team that's playing the Crows. But just as an objective point of view, it's I can imagine the Crows fans are pretty disappointed with how it started because they were looking forward to, even if they weren't going to be a top four contender, they're probably just looking forward to making finals again and just that progression continuing. But they haven't. They're regressing a little bit, which that can turn around pretty quick again next year. But yeah, for this year, it already looks like they're pretty much out of the race.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with you. There's just I've heard a few of the comments is that I saw David King in one of the weeks, and I hate to agree with almost to say they're very vanilla. There's nothing special about their midfield. Like they have a
Mm,
few under like Laird and Crouch and Barry even when he has played, they're great under guys to get the footy, but they don't
mm,
have that silky ball movement. And Dawson is great at the ball movement, but is he really ready for the huge center midfield minutes? I'm not sure. Like I almost
mm,
kind of prefer him off the halfback flanker almost as a center halfback because you use his kick to kind of penetrate through the corridor and it kind of opens up the game this year. So it's like they have not had the disposal through the midfield to be able to use a guy like Tex. I know I agree with you. I think Tex is underdone. I think if I'm almost on their selection committee, do you give him a couple of weeks? Just sit a couple of weeks just to
mm,
kind of see if it gets your back right because you don't go to your first game up at the Gold Coast, which as trashy as that game was, I'm not sure if Tex would have changed much for you in that one. But there's something not right. Yes, you don't have Riley Philthorpe, but is Philthorpe going to change this ball movement? Absolutely not. He's a forward.
mm,
Darcy Fogarty has not fired a shot. I don't know what he needs to do. And it's not like they're sitting there, the treasure trove of youngsters that are just going to come in and be instant igniters to this team. So it's like Matty Nix is sitting in a weird situation. He's got his arms tied and he's being told to box Muhammad Ali. I mean, there's not much he can do. He's
mm,
trying everything he can. I mean, you drop five guys, you bring five guys in, and the same thing happens. Unfortunately, I think they've got a plethora of the same type of player, and I don't know how, unless they go crazy in the trade period and just try to shift out a Crouch or somebody to try to get some maybe youthful, more slick ball moving type of player into this team because Rankin is more of that Shy Bolton, Dusty Martin kind of attacking striker. He does I don't know if he's going to be in the midfield full time. I
mm.
think he's got to be somebody that's got to be able to shift forward because that's where he's the most dangerous. And after that, that's the problem. Like, what about
Yeah, because they've
Saligo, Rochelle?
yeah.
Some of these youngsters, they've went into the midfield and nothing has changed. So
Mm,
it's been very frustrating. I don't want to fully talk about the Crows because I'll give the props to it. Max gone fantastic. Petrarca
mm,
again amazing. Oliver, I think that dislocated finger is really bothering him. But they're getting great performances. Stephen May, oh my God, what a warrior that guy is with
Jesus, man,
cracked
how
ribs, and he steps
I
in and still plays
I
really
don't know
well.
how he does it.
19 possessions, cracked ribs, and you could tell he's got protection on it. It
Mm,
plays an absolute belter. He's fantastic. It'll be very interesting. Again, this D's team, I think that first game, they really focused this group. Again, this is a very talented squad, a great spine, absolutely
mm,
fantastic. Ben Brown's actually playing really good footy. He's kind of back to the way he was when they won the grand final, which is scary for Melbourne because you've already got Bailey Fritch up there. Keziah Pickett is always dangerous
mm,
at ground level. Petrarca can always go forward as well. So this is a D's team on their day can be extremely dangerous. So it'll be fascinating to watch this D's team go forward. We'll move to
mm,
Friday nights and we won't talk too much about this. Brisbane smash North Melbourne. I'm frustrated with this North Melbourne team because I'm not seeing as much progression as I think I thought I would. Maybe Clarko is losing a step. I don't know. I know some people are like, oh my God, how could you blasphemy coach Clarko? All due respect. I don't know if he is the crowned king of coaching that I think some people think he is, but that's just me personally. Your
mm.
thoughts on this one? I mean, Brisbane, I mean, their forwards just had a day against a team that, I mean, let's just be honest, is not going to be much of a contender besides for the wooden spoon this year.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, North Melbourne, got some great young kids in there. Like obviously Wardlaw and Sheasel are, the kids that they're lauding as the future. And but the problem is they their defense depleted after last year, and McKay's gone over and actually having a decent start at Essendon. So um, that's the problem is they've got a young, exciting core there, but then they don't have much else. So all the excitement I think was built off of what those guys can do, but then everything else just isn't. There isn't much there, and it's just like when you're rebuilding, you've got to marry up that exciting core with your positional players, and like how much time are you going to waste with these young kids? I mean, look, Sheasel and Wardlaw got years and years ahead of them, but how many years are you going to have them sit in the midfield in front of a defense that's just letting goals come in from left, right, and center?
Hmm.
And obviously Brisbane hadn't started the season great, but they must have been licking their lips when they're coming over to come over and play North Melbourne to get there, because they just would have known that they've got the obviously the forward line. Eric Hipwood had been getting a little bit of stick for his form. And I think he had 3 goals in the game, so he was able to kick himself
Hmm.
back into a bit of form. And yeah, that just they would have it was very comfortable for them. There's not much else to say than that. The Brisbane get themselves off the canvas for a win for the season, and it will be interesting to see going forward because they could easily be 3-1
Hmm.
because they should have won a couple of those games that they had handy leads in and just let slip. So they would have been smarting about that a little bit, but they've got their win now, and just remains to be seen where they end up. They've given themselves a little bit of a handicap on the season. But yeah, North Melbourne are yeah, pretty just they would have loved the fact they were coming over here to play them. It would have been a nice little weekend in Adelaide for them, I think.
Well, and I look at it too a little bit. And again, I'm not making an excuse here, but I think the ground really also helped Brisbane too, because
Mm,
Norwood is that narrow ground where everything is corridor. And I think that kind of helped Brisbane because they didn't have to worry about having to guard as much space. So they could kind of push up a little bit and make North have to do a little bit more than they wanted to. And again, I agree with you. They've got a ton of talent, but the problem is all their talent is in the midfield. There's no
mm,
defensive. Griffin Logue is out for the season. So
mm,
that was your other guy. Now that McKay is out the door, Aiden Core has just never really worked. I wonder how long his days are at North Melbourne because he just hasn't really worked. I feel sorry for the Toby Pinks and the youngsters back there because I mean you're getting fed to the wolves on a weekly basis. When does it start to wear on them a little bit? So
mm,
I'm with you. I mean, Brisbane just had a field day, unfortunately. Like I said, I hope North figures it out because again, there's tons of great talent there. It's just it's all in the midfield or Larkey up forward, but their biggest deficiency is where the problem is. And
mm.
young midfielders, when you go up against some of the best midfielders like a Lockie Neal, like a Rosie and Butters at Port Adelaide, like a
Thank you.
Oliver, like a Oliver and a Petrarca at Melbourne, like a Tom Green and Canelio at GWS. Like
Mm,
they don't have the body size to be able to tackle them. So if they can run through tackles, I mean, your defense is literally sitting there going, "Oh crap." So I
mm,
mean, unfortunately, that's kind of that might be their season. I hope Clarko can pull a rabbit out of his hat, but I worry that this could be another season where it's like between the Eagles and North Melbourne, does somebody go with a no-win season? Like
mm.
that's my worry this year. That like
Yeah,
could we see a no-win season this
yeah.
year? And I don't wish it upon anybody, especially not North because of all the
Mm,
pain that they went through. But I worry about that a little bit this year. So we'll
yeah.
jump over to it. I know you grinned as I threw out a couple of your elite superstars. So we'll go to your game, sir. I will let you be chuffed as much as possible as your Port Adelaide Power give a hiding to the Essendon Bombers 111 to 42. I have to say this before you get started. This
Mm,
surprised me. This result was probably the biggest surprise of the entire weekend. Even a little bit more surprising than the next game, which I will say was a little bit closer, made me a little bit more concerned than it probably should have been, but I will progress to that a little bit later.
mm,
This surprised me. I thought Essendon was going to at least give you guys a show. I mean, Ivan Soldo, holy crap, has he been a great addition to this team? He
mm.
has stepped into that ruck and he has made it his.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we love Big Ivan already. I recorded our podcast review last night with my co-host Jamie, and I think it ended up going for 2.5 hours. We just had so much to talk about, but yeah, Big Ivan got into our both of our votes for our Player of the Year we're doing, and yeah, he stepped in there well, and a couple of obviously we'll get to gloating about our glorious midfield in a moment. But another thing that we brought up last night was the defense as well. Like Brandon Zerk Thatcher is just quietly having a great start to his career there. Sava Radaglia obviously had a memeable moment last week against Melbourne that I saw
Sorry, I'm not
just
trying to laugh at it, but it's just the fact
oh
that that's
look,
the second
I
time
had
that this has happened to him. I'm
I
just
had
like, oh.
I had to laugh. If you don't laugh, you're gonna cry, which I do plenty as well with this Port team at times. But didn't do it on Friday night. They were So Asava had kind of had a good game. There was we do a thing on our podcast called the Sweeney Awards where we kind of pick moments that make us feel good in the game. And both of our moments were mine was the Brandon Zerk Thatcher chase down tackle that on I'm blanking on which Essendon player, but he looked like he was going to go through and pick up a gather and goal, and Zach Thatcher just stayed on his ass and just laid a tackle on him at the last line of defense. And Asava had the same thing on the day where it looked like a certain goal, and he was able to get a Gresham holding the ball where he was about to kick his third goal of the quarter. So in that first quarter, that was a bit of a battle. So the defense did their job and held. We hadn't held a team to 42 points in a couple of years, so that was the lowest score we've held a team to in a couple of years. And then on top of that, we had Connor Rosie have his best game for us so far and a true captain's game. He's just incredible to watch. Just the way he can twist his body and move through the midfield, the turn of pace he has, and the compliment. Like Jason Horne-Francis, of course, had a great game as well. And any other day, he's probably getting the 3 Brownlow votes, but Rosie just might sneak him for it. But the fact it's an argument just shows how well they both played, and they
Mhm,
complement each other so well. And then you have Zach Butters is almost the forgotten man on the night, but he was in there getting 26 disposals and just kind
mhm,
of had to take a little bit of backseat role and was doing a bit of dishing and handballing and whatnot. But just the way they complement each other is incredible. And Darcy Burn Jones up forward, 3 goals. He's got 9 or 10 goals in the season now. Willie Rioli, after a quiet first couple of weeks, is getting 3 goals a game at the moment. And just so the small forwards are kind of complementing the talls. And Georgiades came back and had a good game back from ACL surgery. It was just all good vibes.
mhm.
That was me basically running down the 2.5 hours we did in that podcast in about 2 minutes for you. So,
Well, again, I've always I love the Power. I think that they're such a fun team to watch because they just have this interesting dynamic of everything because it's like their forward line is like a lot of teams midfield's big, strong, athletic,
mm,
very good. And their midfield is this. I mean, as I said to one person, I said it's a bunch of Porsches. Like they're quick, they're fast, they're really agile. So it's really odd when, like I said, you see it last week when they played Melbourne, and I said it was like Escalades versus Porsches. I said the issue you run into is what type of game is it going to be? Is it going to be a
mm,
finesse speed game, or is it going to be a crash and bash? If it's a crash and bash, Melbourne win all day long. They're bigger
mm,
bodied, they're stronger. But when you play Port, like if you let them get into space, they will absolutely destroy you. And
mm,
with this Essendon team, that unfortunately sometimes they're very inconsistent defensively. One week, Ben McKyle have a great game, gets intercept marks, shut down his direct opponent. And then there's games where, I mean, like this, where it was like, what can he do? Like he's
mm,
literally facing 6 guys coming at him, and he's almost by himself at times. Laverde is sometimes gets lost. I think he also had an injury issue with this. So this is
mm,
just a game where I mean, Port just absolutely waved this game. It just was absolutely nuts. Again, your forward line is scary good when it's on, especially
mm,
when your midfield is getting, like I said, great delivery from Ivan Soldo, which is fantastic to see him get his shot there after Scooter retired last year. So
mm,
it's been fun. This Port team is a ball to watch. I cannot wait. I I'll be fascinated. I'm really looking forward to Port Swans because I think that's going to be a fantastic midfield battle with the
mm.
way Isaac Keeney, Chad Warner, and James Rowbottom have gone. So I really look forward to that game. It's
Yeah.
scary, but I look forward to that game, which is actually a great transition to the Swans v West Coast up at Mount Barker. And I know I'm not the only one as a Swans fan that I sat back on my heels and I went, shouldn't be too difficult. This is a Swans team that put up 200 points against the West Coast Eagles last year. Again, maybe a witch's
That's
hat
right.
performance a
Yeah.
little bit, but
Mm,
but I will give a guy his due. Harley Reid showed why he has the hype, the
mm,
discussion, and why everybody was talking about him almost 200 days before the draft because this young man was ridiculously good. He was running through tackles of players that I've very rarely seen them miss tackles. So,
mm,
all due respect to Harley Reid, I think the Eagles, I think Simpson finally found something. And I hope I hope for West Coast Eagles supporters that they have, because
Mm,
the pain that they've went through over the last couple of seasons, the utter, I mean, shit show that they've had to deal with because of everything that's happened since the hubs up
mm,
in, during COVID. This West Coast Eagles team, for the once mighty Eagles, have just been absolutely atrocious. They might have finally found something, and I hope so. Were the Swans great? Absolutely not. They were fumbly. They missed some kicks that they haven't missed all season. I'm kind of glad they're hitting the bye week this week, because the
mm,
last couple of games have been un-Sydney like, if you look at the first three performances. So I kind of don't mind them getting a bye week. Maybe Coach Longmire can run the balls off of them a little bit, and like, hey, pull your heads in, guys, because those last two games were not what we have seen previously. They get the win. Heaney again, fantastic. Errol Goulden again, fantastic. Great to see Taylor Adams come in and get a goal in his debut. That was great to see. West Coast put up a fight. This was never out of the question. West Coast was always in it, even into the fourth quarter. Swans put up a little bit. The 26-point margin, I think, is a little bit of a misnomer. This was a 3-goal game for most of the game. It never really got out of hand for the Swans over the Eagles. So again, hat tip to the West Coast Eagles. A great game. They played really well up at Mount Barker. Mount Barker looked magnificent. What a
mm.
ground up there at the Adelaide Hills.
Yeah, yeah, and beautiful. It's nice to see. I mean, you know, sitting over here in um, was it Des Moines, Iowa? That's where you're from,
Hmm.
isn't it? Yeah, yeah. You're over there, and you're getting to watch Mount Barker and get a view of the Adelaide Hills, and it's one of the wonderful things about Gather Round. I know we'll get to that in a little bit, but yeah, it's yeah. Geez, that field looked good on TV, and
Hmm.
um, echo your thoughts on Harley Reid. Just for someone like me that was a teenager in the early 2000s and into my 20s in the mid 2000s, just watching a number 9 run around like that. I know obviously Nick Nat was wearing the number 9, but in a different position. It's just watching someone, just it's not like he's the same player as Ben Cousins obviously, but just kind of the number 9 Guernsey for West Coast is so iconic, and
Hmm.
it's fun seeing a player that looks like he's going to be an absolute generational talent. As someone who, as much as I hated having to play West Coast in those years, I had a lot of love for just the game that Ben Cousins played, and yeah, it's really cool to see a number 9 running around like that. And he really announced himself. I think someone on Twitter, I don't know if it was, I might have seen it via the Americans watching the Footy Boys, but I can't remember who actually said it. But they said like it's going to be a trivia question that Harley Reid where his first goal was. like, um, because no, in 10 years, are people going to remember it was at Mount Barker in the Adelaide
Hmm.
Hills? But yeah, but yeah, your boys look good to start the season. Obviously, I know you're a bit worried about the way the game went, but it never felt like you were going to lose it either, to me. But maybe that's just
Hmm.
it just felt like it was going to be. And Isaac Heaney's having just an incredible year so far, and geez, he's a bloody fun one to watch. And yeah, I'm quite impressed with how you guys have started the season. It's pretty tough to start the season this well sometimes because you're trying to feel out the competition as well. And it's been a good start for your boys.
Yeah, it's been fun. Like I said, I'm kind of one of those. I don't mind a humbler, and that loss to Richmond, I think,
Mm,
is one of those. Again, most people go, you never like a loss. I'm one of those. Sometimes a loss sometimes can focus guys a little bit. Did it focus them as much as I wanted them to? Probably not. But
mm,
again, I'm with you. I was never worried they were going to lose the game. It was just there were a few moments when West Coast had the lead or late in the second quarter. I was sitting here going, are Sydney going to literally do this to me? Like that was kind of the moment. Like I sat there and I went,
yeah.
or are they going to do this to me? And then like I think they kicked the next two of the next three goals, took the lead by 8 at the half, and I was just like, okay, I think we're going to be okay. But it was just, there were a few moments where I was a little more uneasy, shall we say, than I
Mm,
probably wanted it to be. But
yeah.
again, like I said, I hope nothing but the best for the West Coast Eagles, and that they figure things out. Like I said, that I think they've got a great one there. The $9 million question will be is will the big Victorian clubs come a calling after 3 years,
Hmm.
will be the big thing. And
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that, because I honestly think he's found himself a nice place at the West Coast Eagles where he can kind of establish his own legacy. So we'll have to see. Again,
Hmm.
many, many years of Harley Reid, I hope, and we knock on touch wood and all that. So Well, go back over to the Adelaide Oval, where I think the game that's on everybody's tongue, and it's more of how the game ended more than the game, because we're going to focus on the controversy a little bit later. I don't want to talk about it
Hmm.
right now. Let's save it for burning questions, because personally, if you take the controversy away from this, the Dockers have a lot to be positive about because they held a very good Carlton team under 75 points.
Hmm.
And most of that game, they led. Most of that game, they were up by at least a goal, and they dominated Carlton in clearances, which is not something prior to this year you would have said too much about Carlton. Carlton was the center clearance beasts of the competition. Fremantle dominated the center clearance. Luke Jackson has really, I think, is going to put a little bit into Longmuir. Does he bring Sean Darcy back in the ruck, or
Hmm.
does he debate leaving him down with Peel in the waffle? Because Luke Jackson right now is playing incredibly good football.
Hmm. Yeah, no, agreed. We kind of touched and we just talked about Freo a bit last night on our podcast too, because we're playing them this Saturday night. Um, and yeah, it is the question like Darcy, because I think he's coming. He was a 1 week injury last week, so I assume he's going to be a test this week and come and be available. So, but yeah, Luke Jackson is, you know, is who we thought he was coming over, and obviously he had a pretty good start at Melbourne. But the fact that they put that effort into bringing him back home, and just he's kind of that new age kind of ruck, because he's quite athletic and can move well, and just do more around the field than your old school ruckman maybe could, and adds an extra element, and obviously helps out in the midfield as well. So yeah, and Freo and Carlton, like Freo and Carlton, the two teams are really. I mean, Freo had that down year after looking like they were going to be a
Mhm.
top eight stalwart for a couple of years, but that sometimes happens. You kind of have to regress a little bit to figure out a few other things. But they look good to start the year, and yeah, it's one of those games. Obviously, controversy aside, you just sometimes you lose a game that you should have won. Like Port had that feeling against Melbourne last week, that
Mhm.
we dominated a lot of things and kept ourselves ahead by a goal and a half or a couple of goals at most of the game, and then you just have end of the game. There's a little bit of chaos, and obviously we'll talk about that other stuff later, but just sometimes you lose a game that you should have won, but you can take a lot of positives out of it because you go, there's not much we have to change, to make sure that result goes differently next time, and that's a good thing, as a team. That's what we did last week when we were reviewing our Melbourne game. It's just like sometimes you got to look at the positives and go, all right, we can be constructively critical about what went wrong, but yeah, Freo got to be pretty happy with how they started the year, and losing to Carlton in gather round in that kind of atmosphere and just the unique nature of it, and being
Mhm.
being in the battle. I don't think it's yeah, you don't slouch at losses like that. Obviously, as you said, you want to win them, but sometimes a loss, if you have to take it, if you've done it the right way, can be something you can learn from, and I think they'll take a lot of learnings from it. And Carlton will certainly be pretty pleased too, because they've started the season red hot, kind of carrying on from how they finished last year.
It's one of those. Carlton again. They're right now. They're turning into Collingwood from a couple of years ago. They're finding ways to win games. They're finding ways to win close games late. So it's again, absolutely no shade at Fremantle. That was a hell of a
Mm,
game. Like honestly, if you're Fremantle and you're Coach Longmuir, you're literally telling your guys like, there's nothing shameful in that performance.
mm,
Absolutely nothing. Like as injury riddled as their team is, for them to play as well as they are. I mean, Caleb Sarong is in absolutely in fuego form right now. Like there
mm.
is no better midfielder right
He's
now. Like
incredible.
I'm in a fantasy league, and the guy that's got Caleb Sarong right now is just, I mean, he's chuffed right now because Sarong's averaging, he's a captain, so he's averaging like 240 points. It's
Jesus.
ridiculous how well Sarong is doing. So again, I'm absolutely chuffed if I'm a Docker supporter. Does it suck that you lost? Absolutely, but there's so much positive out of that. And the
Mm,
Carlton faithful, to see the old blue baggers dusting off the unis and coming back and being so excited, it's very fascinating for the competition. We'll have to
mm,
see, does it last? Because it's always interesting sometimes winning a lot of close games, because sometimes you're destined to play a lot of them, and sometimes that can
mm,
hurt you come finals time. So let's jump over to the other game at Adelaide Oval on Saturday night, and that is the absolute shootout between the Western Bulldogs and the Geelong Cats. And the Cats start the season 4-0 with a 95-91 win over the Doggies. And damn it, the Cats, they just have 9 lives. Like last year, they don't make finals. And again, this year, they look to be another team that could potentially compete for a flag.
Yeah, and they just won't die. Like you keep waiting for this goddamn Geelong juggernaut to go away, and they don't. But credit to them, and that they've kind of, because last year people just, it's kind of like the New England Patriots over here.
Mhm.
Um, that people just keep wanting to write them off, and then the Patriots would go on and win another Super Bowl, and kind of Cats, a couple of years ago, or a couple of years before that, people started asking the question, are they too old? And then they get themselves together to win another flag. And then last year it
Mhm.
was, oh, are they too old? And then this year they're starting the season really well again. So, um, and they're just their consistent level of, they're a bit like, what is it, 11 out of the last 13 years they've made finals. And it's just an
Mhm.
incredible run. And they were missing Dangerfield and Guthrie, I believe, on the weekend as
Mhm.
well, and they still were able to gut out a result. You've got Tyson Stengel playing really well at forward after probably having a down year after his All Australian year, and Jeremy Cameron kind of was. Cameron had like 600-700 meters gain because he was really moving around the field well. He
Mhm.
bit inaccurate in front of goal,
Two
but
four. Yep.
yeah, but overall, just a really, really good game from him as far as what he could do around the field and contribute in other ways. And yeah, they just won't die. But the doggies, to their credit, because they're a bit of an enigma at the moment as well. With
Mhm.
every week it feels like people someone wants beverage fight, and there's plenty of reasons behind that for the fans that talk about it. But they to have that kind of game, I think, was respectable for them as well. And Liberatore, just an incredible performance as well.
Mhm.
19 clearances, 28 contested possessions. That's a liberatory game. That'll be like what's on his. You talk about Hall of Fame plaques or whatever. If that's the kind of game you put on there, is like that's what dictates the kind of player he was, and at his best, and what he can provide for the Bulldogs, and a big part of why they were so close in that game. But yeah, the Cats find a way.
Yeah, just it was insane. Jeremy Cameron has 27 disposals, 2 goals, 4 behinds, but he did so much more than just put up points. I mean, his ability to push up forward and almost be a seventh midfielder is ridiculous at times. And then when
Mm,
you have Hawkins, Myers, Close, Oliver, and Ollie Henry up there, it's like it's what poise and chalice do you want? And Tyson Stengel, I forgot Tyson Stengel. How do you forget that? That's how scary the Cats
mm,
can be, and they're doing it with a midfielder. Really, it's kind of a makeshift midfield. Tanner
mm,
Bruin, Jack Bowes, uh Parfit, who was constantly never in the team, including even in the grand final where he was the sub. Like, it's not the Cam Guthrie's, Joel Selwoods, and Dangerfields, but they get it done. Blitzovs goes in there. Reece Stanley has another great game in
mm.
which he kind of is inconsistent, which is against Timmy English, one of the best rucks in the competition. Reece Stanley has a great game, and their defense is damn well impenetrable at times when Tommy Stewart's back there and can just roam
He's
around. He's
incredible.
ridiculous at times. This is a Cats team. If they can stay healthy,
That's the thing,
they're
isn't it? Yeah.
scary. They are scary good because offensively they're a nightmare to stop. Midfield will be the question is can they keep the depth in the midfield and can it survive the pounding it's going to take as the year goes on? Danger usually when he's out there, he's pretty durable. The issue he's
Mm.
running into is he's having these hamstring injuries. Cam Guthrie has had that quad injury that will see him out for at least another 4 or 5 weeks. So this is a Cats team that they still have some bullets in the gun. We'll have to see on that, but it's scary to watch this Cats team continue to find ways to be successful in this competition. But you can't hate them because you got to respect what they do because
It's
they're not doing it with top 20 players. I mean,
yeah.
they're drafting in the back part of the draft every year because they're making it to finals and they're going deep into finals usually. So they're just they're very 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 wily and they're fun to watch at times. So
It's that bit from Anchorman where he's like holding Rodden Burgundy on the ladder, and this is me with Geelong. It's like I hate you with every fiber of my being, but god damn it, I respect you. Like it's
pretty much. Yeah, I'm
uh,
100% with it, and it's the one thing that I kind of laugh about the club with the Swans and the Cats is that consistently they're in finals, consistently
mm,
they're there, and they do it they don't do it with top tier talent normally. Normally they're
Yeah.
not there. They have to draft very intelligently because they know they're going to have to pick the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th best player in the draft and find a way to make them as good as a one, two, three, four, or five. So
Mhm.
just it's scary what they can do, but they're smart. And then they bring in high quality, high caliber guys from other teams that just they want to get out of the bowl of Melbourne, or they want to be closer to Geelong because they're originally from there. So
Mhm.
this weird amazing dichotomy down there that's so much fun to watch. So
Mhm.
we'll jump back up to Mount Barker, and I love it that the GWS, whoever does their social media needs like the raise of a lifetime, because this got so much more entertaining. The expansion club cup, I
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And I will give Dimma's men a lot of credit. They made
Mhm.
this game a little bit more exciting and a little bit closer than I thought it was. Mac Andrew has a blinder of a game. He shows
Yes.
why he was such a high caliber draft pick in his draft year, and he was incredible. Had I think it was 11 intercept possessions in this game, absolutely fantastic. But the Giants, just too good. I mean, Jesse Hogan. I mean, there's still Fremantle and Melbourne fans going, "Why didn't we get this Jesse Hogan?" It's insane. Toby
Mhm.
Green, magnificent again. Yes, I'm a Sydney Swans fan, but I will give Toby Green his due. The man is incredible. The man is absolutely incredible. Giants get a
Mhm.
28-point win, 117-89. But again, I like what Dim is doing. He hasn't just taken the Tigers mold and moved it up there, because I don't think it was going to work with the roster that he has. I think he's doing some good things there. I'm not sure if it's a finals team this year for Gold Coast. I think there's still a few things that still need to go, but I think he's starting off pretty well. And when you've got guys like Jed Walter playing incredibly well as a rookie in his first year, a lot of good things to look at up in the Gold Coast.
Absolutely, yeah, and you saw it kind of early in the season with some of the performances. Yeah, they haven't got the wins on the like they're 2-2 now, but they started the season well and obviously won the Dimmer Cup against Richmond. And yeah, I'm like if you're, I know maybe some people were probably expecting maybe immediate results, and I think 2-2 is an immediate result, but it's going to be a build for Dimmer up at the Gold Coast Suns, and the early signs are good. Obviously, Matt Rowell had been fit, and he's in his third or fourth season now, and he's had some significant injuries. So, but he's incredible. Obviously, Noah Anderson's a great player as well, and as you already touched on, Mac Andrew kind of had that performance that kind of announces himself to probably a few more people that maybe just because the Gold Coast Suns are a team that sometimes you just stay out of your periphery a little bit if they're just plodding along doing what Gold Coast Suns have done for 10 years, which is be frustratingly bad. But yeah, Mac Andrew kind of announced himself to a few more just AFL fans, I think, this weekend. But yeah, that GWS team, obviously, as a Port fan, Adam Kingsley's a guy that's a really a special place in my heart. With him being a part of those early Port teams that I watched growing up, and it's certainly a part of our 2004 Premiership team, and what he did to stay in contention for Port at the time when he was almost on there. He almost got delisted and kind of got his place back and ended up in the grand final side and kicked a goal that day as well. Um, I love seeing what he's doing as a coach. Is just shows sometimes what a you know what because that team was in the grand final a couple of years ago, well 4 or 5 years ago now.
Mhm.
Geez, time flew over the last 5 years. But they were in the grand final with it, Leon Cameron, and then they kind of fell away, and it just showed that they still had what they just needed a bit of a change of ideas and what the way that the kind of expressive, free but fundamentally sound brand of football that uh, King has got him playing is got him off to well, obviously the best start possible to the season, and um, yeah, they're building pretty well. They're scared. They're one of my premiership favorites. I kind of had them up there at the start of the year, and it's only solidified in my mind so far if they stay fit and keep playing the kind of footy they are.
Yeah, I went into this season, and I know some people were saying, they said, how crazy would it be for Victorians if two New South Wales teams play in the grand final? Because I mean, early in the season, I heard that conversation.
Ooh.
GWS, it's hard to argue that they look absolutely cherry ripe. My only worry, and I've said this to a few people a few times, I said that my worry is, are they peaking early? Like
Yeah.
that's my one worry sometimes when you see a team playing really good footy right at the start of the season, is that do you peak too early? Do you jump the shark a little bit when it comes to your form because you're going to have form slumps?
Mhm.
Do you want to have a form slump early in the season where you can make adjustments and make things a little bit better? Or do you want to have great form at the start of the season, have a form slump later on closer to finals where it could cost you a top four spot? So
Mhm.
like I'm looking at again, maybe it's the skepticism of me a little bit. I try not to. I try to be but that's my one worry is are they peaking early? Are
Mhm.
they going a little bit too hard too early in games where maybe they need to pull back because it's great to be 5-0 to start the season, but it's the last round in September is the one you want to be at. Not you don't want to be playing your best footy now. You want to be playing your best footy come September. So that's my only thing
Mhm.
that I say. Again, I'm not trying to be negative. It's not the Harbor City whatever or Sydney Derby or whatever they want to call it. That is just me being like that is the honest. I've seen this before. I've seen teams North Melbourne 10 years ago was 10-0, barely made the
Mhm.
finals. So,
Port, back in 2014, we
yep.
started 10-1, and then we still made the finals, obviously, but we finished outside the top four after
Hmm.
kind of meddling with the little bit middle period of the season, like you said, and whether that was because we went too hard or we just like, flirted with our form a bit too much, and we still almost made the grand final. But yeah, maybe that path would have been easier if we managed to hold a top four spot by being a little bit more level headed throughout the season. So it's an interesting. It's one of those things that we'll only know once hindsight gives us a view back in when it comes to October,
Hmm.
maybe. But
I mean,
there's
hindsight's
certainly
2020. I know that for
yeah.
sure.
But
But
yeah,
it's
no,
just like
it's
I said,
yeah,
just
really impressive to watch. Anyway, they're a fun team to
oh yeah.
watch. Like I wouldn't have expected to be tuning into GWS game, but I do kind of turn my head a little bit whenever I hear the highlights or whatever pop up because they're just a fun team to watch. And as I said, soft spot for Kinga as well.
Yeah, that was a and that was a great game too. Gold Coast played
Mm,
really well. So we'll jump back to Norwood Oval in an absolute, especially a classic game here, as St. Kilda survive a scare from the Richmond Tigers, 67-60 at Norwood Oval. And as Shai Bolton again shows why he is an absolute magician with footy in hand. But if I'm sitting here and I have to say this, if I'm Ross Lyon, you look at this tape, you wipe your brow and you go, whew, that was a little closer than I think some people expected because this Tigers team, again, no Balta, no Lynch, Dusty back. Is he 100%? He still looked really, really good. You
mm,
get a win in a game that you were far from impressive.
yeah. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think because I watched the game on FS2 over here. Actually, I'm trying to think. Oh yeah,
Hmm.
I've been out at seeing my Oregon Ducks were playing baseball down here at UCLA. So, and it was bitterly cold, and I got inside, made myself a coffee, trying to defrost and put the game on, and that helped me warm up pretty quickly because it was just kind of chaotic. It wasn't always pretty, but it
Hmm.
was fascinating to watch because you knew, like, obviously Richmond got out to a fast start, and they were really electric, but you just kind of knew that St Kilda had a run in them, and especially the unique nature of that ground kind of makes it adds to the chaos as well. Um, and so it was just fascinating. It was fascinating to watch in the sense of like it's probably not a game that going to put on big highlights packages, but it was still kind of one of those games that just makes you love Aussie rules footy. And
Hmm.
yeah, Shy Bolton he's been special. Like there's been another game he was kind of had a decent game against us, I think, or am I thinking of another game? But he's just one of those players that I always key in on as a fan of the game. Like he's just any highlights packages. If I see a Shy Bolton highlight pop up on my phone as a notification on the AFL app, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna watch that.
Hmm.
But yeah, St Kilda Ross Lyon teams are just teams that I'm never going to fully trust, and this is kind of and like maybe that's some low hanging fruit, but there is historical precedent for it. Like he's a really good coach and gets teams playing, but it's just yeah, I don't that start was kind of fascinating. They were a bit had a bit of misfortune in front of goal early as well, which added to the whereas Richmond were and kicked away quickly, but yeah, they get away with the win, which is sometimes what you've got to do. Good is, Collingwood in their last couple of years have got away with some results where they've got themselves behind the eight ball a little, behind a little bit, and then found their way back and just fought a way to win. Um, I think it's a sign of good character within a team to find a way to make sure you're ahead when that final siren sounds. I said that a few times about our team last year in our 13 game winning streak. We had to find a way to win in some of those games, and we did. And I think that's good character. That's good character building stuff. So I'm not too concerned for St Kilda, but also I'm not. I don't. I still don't trust them completely either. So it's one of
Hmm.
those games that didn't really tell me anything new apart from like I know they're a good team. They've got some good talent. Max King had a couple of nice goals, I think. But I was a little bit delirious watching that game. I was a bit sleep deprived, and again, I was defrosting from the sun in LA is really nice, but then once it go like in April, once the sun goes down, it just suddenly turns to icicles, and yeah. But it was a fun game to watch to kind of defrost from that.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those. It was kind of chaos in a bottle at times because
Mm,
again with Norwood skinny ground, and sometimes it makes for entertaining footy because almost everything is corridor. That it really brought everything together, and you had a couple of teams that are you have a Saints team that the ground kind of doesn't really help them. They need a lot of space to be able to use their speed. So this was kind of a game they survived. They get a win in an environment that really again wasn't suited for their style of play. So it's a
mm,
gritty win. Again, Ross, I think, had some kind of comment about how he felt like his team was taken over by aliens. Again, I don't know why, but it was kind of comical to actually hear him talking about.
Ross
I don't know.
Ross
He is a
Ross Lyon in
character and
press
a half.
conferences, yeah.
So I don't know, but it was again,
So,
it was a fantastic game. I remember watching it. I remember watching it myself on in the early evenings. I was enthralled by it because it was like midnight my time, and I was sitting there and I was like this game it kept getting better and better, and I was like sitting here going, "Gee, what's gonna happen?" Like I knew something funny was gonna happen, and when the Saints
mm,
came back and took the lead, I was like, that's what's going to happen is Richmond's going to let that lead slip away. So it was a great game of footy. Again entertaining again. You got it a little bit for Richmond because they've had a couple of games that have just slipped through their fingers,
mm,
unfortunately, this season. And for with their injury list, unfortunately, they're kind of trying to survive right now. They're having to blood some youngsters, which I think is actually good for their long-term health, but it's a little
mm,
frustrating for Uze because he wants to win, but
mm,
he's having to play some guys that I don't think he was fully ready to just give the reins to right now. So it'll be fun to see, could this season and could some of these games actually help them in the long run. It'll be fun to watch. And then we'll jump to the last one at Adelaide Oval, the absolute classic. I don't think the schedule makers probably would have thought that this game would have been as entertaining as hell as it was.
mm.
But not only with with the Ginnivan stuff, but just the fact that I mean Hawthorne probably should have won this game.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the way they came back because they got themselves within a goal with what was it 5 minutes to go, I think.
Yep.
Which was, and I kind of just the way that the momentum that they had, and the way they were, and Collingwood seemed like suddenly out on their feet, like they just kind of put a lot of effort into getting themselves up by what 38 points at halftime, I think it
Hmm.
was. They probably thought, and understandably so, that they had the game won at halftime, and it was just a matter of game management for the rest of the game. And unfortunately, sometimes when you fall into that kind of mindset, and the other team in Hawthorn just decides to throw the kitchen sink at you and see what they can get out of it. Sometimes when that tide starts and that tsunami starts, so to speak, it's hard to stop. And yeah, there was some moments in that last 5 minutes, that frenetic 5 minutes where the ball kept on coming inboard into the Hawthorn forward 50, and just a little bit of maybe a bad luck of the bounce. Like, I'm trying to think if there was. I'm blanking now because that game. By the time that game finished here, it was like 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Hmm.
Um, but I can't remember if they had a golden chance. I remember I feel like they had a couple of half chances that maybe could have got a handle on the ball and put one through. But it's just Collingwood kind of just defended with their life a little bit. And there was possibly, I'm trying to think. I feel like there was one that I think
I
Isaac
think Moore had a
Isaac.
I think Moore had a shot one time and they were up
Mm,
because they were I think Hawthorne was down five, and if it would have went through it would give Hawthorne the lead. And
mm,
I think if he puts it through, I think Hawthorne kind of runs it over, and they kind of I think they put up enough to win it. But the fact that he skews it off the boot, and I think it goes out on the I think it either goes out on the floor or goes for a behind. So instead of being up one, you're still down four. And
yeah.
Collingwood was able to kind of just they kind of burn off another 45 to a minute and a half, just kick Mark, kind of going down the line before you bomb it to contest down the sideline. I think that's what happened is every time Hawthorne had a chance to kind of give themselves the lead, it would skew, it would miss. And so I think
Mm,
it's one of those. I agree with you. This is a Collingwood team that you're so used to them in the fourth quarter having that run, having that go, and they didn't have it. And it
mm,
was almost like, have they spent their petrol tickets already? And it's
yeah.
crazy to think because of how good the previous two seasons they've been in the fourth quarter. But I know they've got the bye week this week, but that's a scary sign that you're in round four and they already are getting to a fourth quarter and look like there's no more petrol in the tank. And that's
Mm,
if I'm Craig McRae, are you pushing a little too much in training to kind of make up for the horrible start? Like there's questions that are starting to kind of pop into that. But I I want to go to this. The fact that the fact that I don't mean to do this, and maybe with you being a Port fan, you'll laugh at this even more. The I can we now look at Collingwood fans and go, hey, you're not supposed to bully a 20-year-old player. Why are you booing him? Why are you booing him? Why are you booing him? Because didn't we get that all of last year when he was getting booed by other teams? It's, why are you booing a 20-year-old player?
Even funnier is them they're whinging about the free kicks and the ducking and all that stuff because they defended him to the absolute
Absolute hilt.
edge of the
Absolute.
earth
And
and
I remember some of the announcers were saying like, what's going to happen the first time Buzzy Maynard tackles him and he gets it, if he gets it higher, they're going to call it. And when they did, there was almost the sarcastic cheer by the Hawks fans and
mm,
the vitriolic boos that you heard from the Collingwood supporters. And I went, the irony is not lost on some of us. And again, I have plenty of Collingwood friends who I know very much. And again, I don't mean it. I'm not trying to be rude, but it's a little hypocritical that you spend so much time lecturing other clubs on how not to do it, but
mm.
the first time you face him, you kind of do the same thing.
Mm.
I may want to think
He's
about that. So
yeah, he's a
he's a
it's incredible.
character. He's
He's
a
a character,
character.
and he's good for the game. Like he's one of those blokes that he has a bit of mongrel in him, and
Hmm.
he knows he's kind of got that personality that he knows he's kind of divisive, but he doesn't actually do anything that is that divisive. Because the
I
ducking thing, like he actually, I think Joel Selwood came out with some advice for him last week as well, which is fun because Joel Selwood, I've
same thing.
been I've been at Geelong games both as a Port fan. I've been to Geelong for a Port game. I don't know if you remember a few years ago when Charlie Dixon messed up the shot clock. I was at that
Oh,
game.
yep, I remember that one. Yep.
Yeah, when he took it a little bit too long. When I think that 30-second thing might have been the first season that year. But yeah, I was at that game, and I've been to a few at Adelaide Oval as well. And Joel Selwood has been someone I've sworn at a lot over the years for the ducking. But once you take yourself out of the heat of the battle, it is such a fast paced game. And yeah, they do. Some players do have a propensity to know how to kind of move their body and get some of those calls. But
Hmm.
it's the dark arts of sports. Every sport has it. The NBA, soccer, whatever it is. Some players just know how to toe that line and
Hmm.
um, you know, Jevin, I don't know if he's doing that so much, but he gets the reaction from fans, and that, like I said, it's good for characters are good for any game, and he doesn't actually do anything um, super objectionably wrong. He's just a character that raises emotions, and
Hmm.
certainly having such a high profile move at such a young age after an explosive start to a career. He's already got a premiership medal and an Anzac Day medal, and he's moved on after a couple of
Hmm.
years to another historic club. It's an incredible kind of side storyline to it, and it certainly blew up in that fourth quarter. Some of the jumper punching and how he was
Hmm.
getting under their skin, and the big smile that was on his face. I was wanting to go to bed. I thought, oh, if this game turns into, and then I was like, I'll watch a bit of the second half, and then they kind of started pouring their way back. I was like, oh, well, I got to stay up, and then ended up keeping me awake with how exciting it got in that last quarter.
I think for me more of the thing was is that I never was angry at the kid. I was just more of a thing where it was like the fact that he was bragging on social media about being able to get away with it, and then it was like, and then kind of it
Mm-hmm.
went almost a little bit too far. Like I understood as some of this, like there were some high tackles that he wasn't getting the call because it was him, but like
Mm-hmm.
it is kind of like I hate to say it this way because it sounds like there's this conspiracy theory, but I don't think it really is. I just think it's one of those where it's like you lose that luxury when you brag about it because now the
Yes. Yeah.
umpires aren't going to fall for it because they think any time that the arm goes up that you're faking it. So it's
Mm.
kind of one of those where it was like, son, the reason you're getting your head taken off is because you made the mistake of saying something. You shouldn't have said nothing. If you
Yeah.
wouldn't have been caught on social media bragging that you were getting away with it, you'd still probably be getting away with it. You'd probably be kicking more goals, and you can chuckle to the bank with being a higher paid player because you have more goals under your bag. But as a youngster with some brash and some cojones, shall we say, he made the mistake of opening his mouth, and
Mm.
he paid for it a little bit. Do I think the AFL's kind of ratcheted it back a little bit with this last one because of the few that haven't been called? Absolutely. Is it going to
Mm.
stay that way? We'll have to see. Because again, sometimes once umpires kind of get what players are doing, sometimes they umpire a little bit differently. I
Mm.
completely understand it because it's common nature. So,
It
and,
happens in all
and
happens in all sports. Players
exactly. And my
again.
favorite part, and my favorite part about that is this is a great transition. We go to the burning questions. We
Mm.
said it earlier, we were saving it for now. We got to talk the controversial ending of Fremantle Carlton,
Oh my
not
god.
only for the missed call, but
Mm.
then for what happened a little bit later and all of that. So
Mm.
I asked this of you, your thoughts as a fan of footy on this, and is there anything we can do to quote unquote fix it?
Yeah, no, I hated all of it basically because I the touch starting with the touch thing in live motion, it's hard to see. I think, and
I'll say this: if you look at the regular TV camera angle, you had
yeah.
no idea that it deflected. If you see the behind him angle where you have Fife coming towards a
Hmm.
Hewitt, then it's obvious. It's
Yeah.
very obvious. Where the umpires are, you can't tell in either of those camera angles, so I can kind of see how they missed it. But I'm telling you this, if there was any kind of review system, that would have been a very quick change. But again, there's no review system. So, and we'll
Mm.
discuss we can go on that more. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but I just thought
No,
it
no,
was
you're
funny
right.
that
Because yeah, that
the
was
TV camera angle, you had no idea. You had
I had
absolutely
no
no idea
idea.
that did.
Yeah, I had no idea when like I said, I was watching. I had it recorded and watched the replay the morning after. And yeah, like when I saw it, I didn't see it on the first go, which is always my first point of call when these controversies pop up. I'm like, well, did I notice it first go around? Because often you do as a fan. But yeah, on subsequent angles, you did see it. But again, it's not part of a goal scoring play. So it's kind of like you go, it happens in soccer as well. They talk about sequences of play and when did the
Hmm.
sequence of play change. And yeah, it's borderline because it is ends up being a direct goal assist more or less. But um, I don't I don't like the idea of a captain's challenge or anything like that. I just
Hmm.
that seems like an entirely reactionary thing to one mistake. That these things we used to just have to deal with back in the back in my day. With footy. When you're growing up, and especially we didn't have, when you think about watching TV back in the 90s and earlier, when I first started watching footy, TV, it was grainy and you couldn't even see it. No one would care. But now we've got such good high definition views of the game. We see it so much more clearer, and it makes it feel that much more painful as a fan when those ones are missed. But I just don't know. We keep fans are complaining right now. We talked about this a bit off air, like about the reviews with goals because goal umpires are trying to get those right after the situation that involved your team last year,
Hmm.
Bennett. And people are complaining because of a 10-second process that they shouldn't really like. They're getting it right, so I don't see a reason to complain. But they're complaining about that because it's slowing down the game, and they should just see it. So but then they want their captains to have the chance to be able to do it themselves. So then where do you draw the line? What do you draw the line at? What they can challenge? Because then if you bring in a captain's challenge and then something that they can't challenge happens, then we're going to have the same discussion about, well, we need to change it so they can challenge that, and then they'll start being like, we should need to be able to challenge holding the ball calls, which sometimes can be very subjective,
Hmm.
and entirely up for debate, and then that will be up for debate if a call gets overturned but the other team feels aggrieved, they'll be like, "Well, they need to lock it." So it's never going to end. It's going to
Hmm.
just be a never-ending process. So that's what I think about that. After the dissent thing, I think that was a bit of that was an over officious penalty. I don't think that
Hmm.
should have happened. A goal kick, getting a direct, essentially 2 goals out of 0 seconds of play for dissent. I think that's an over officious.
Hmm.
Particular, and there's all the controversy about was he swearing at himself or was he swearing at the umpire? That's the thing now, and
Hmm.
the Western Australian media is, I think, the state of Western Australia might secede this week at this point. Um, but yeah, I do think that was too that shouldn't be that for dissent of that nature where apparently the umpire wasn't even sure what he said. I
Hmm.
just think that was too much of a penalty. It killed the end of the game. Um, as a spectacle. And the game is for like the AFL game at the professional level. It is a game for fans as well as the players, obviously. But you just they just that game was decided not with the touch call, by the way. It was decided by
Hmm.
umpires by the fact that they over officiated in that moment and gave Carlton essentially just a like bullshit penalty. And let them line up straight in front of goal and end the game that way. And Frio, I don't agree with the over, you know, the missed touch call is one of those things, as I said. But they were screwed with that dissent call, I think, which is the complete opposite of the AFL's apologising for the touch or saying dissent's correct. I'm like, oh no, it's it ruined the end of a good game because imagine having a centre bounce with 40 seconds to go with Frio trying to go down the other end and get and
Hmm.
steal the game. Would have been an incredible end to the game, but we just went instead. We're talking about this.
I'm one of those that, you know, I'll address kind of both of them really really quickly because
Mm,
I'm 100% with you, and I even stated it. I told you off mic. I heard Lee Montagna bring up this coach's challenge, which I think it's an interesting thing. I just
hmm
don't think it's feasible because the game doesn't have the stoppages that many of the games that he used as reference do. Rugby league, rugby union, NFL,
mm,
MLB, NHL. They have significant stoppages in play during the game. The only significant stoppages you really have during an AFL game is an injury or a goal. That's it. Other
hmm
than that, the game is pretty much in play most of the time. Even in soccer, you can have a significant stoppage of play if the ball is kicked out of play or there's a foul that's committed and the referee has to give a card. So there's
hmm
significant stoppages to be able to have a review system. I don't think there is that ability to do that. And then the question is, does the captain have to take a little flag and keep it on him at all times? Do we have to there's a few things that I just don't think it'll
Those shorts
work
don't have a lot of space.
unless he tucks it in his sock, and then it's like the
Yeah,
ham thing with the Geelong player. So we won't go
yeah.
there. But it's just one of those. And then my favorite part about it is and then Lee Montagna goes off on and he says that where you could use it. Well, and I kind of wanted to scream at the television or my iPad in this situation. I said, well,
Mhm,
dude, what you're saying, this whole controversy is not a challengeable event because it wasn't a goal. It wasn't a wrong call per se, because it has to be called a way to be able. So it's like, what are are
mhm.
you challenging the mark?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a few things that it's just not adding up. And again, and I understand it, and I get it. You're trying to fix it, but you're asking human beings to be perfect
Mhm,
that aren't perfect. A number one. Number two, I said this off mic, and I kind of want to get this off my chest, and I've said this a few times. You and I have both stated I don't understand the complaining, the whinging, the sucking, and the whining by all of these media announcers about the reviews. Here's the thing: if you're going to whine, do me a favor, write a letter to the AFL because that's the reason why this is happening. They stood down that umpire that made the mistake in the Adelaide game. And again, I'm not saying that there isn't a grievance because there is. I know plenty of Crows fans. There's a ton of grievance because it could have cost them a final. Again, I'm not going to say it did because we don't know because there was still another round to play. And I think if it would have been overturned and done something else, I think potentially you could have seen a different result in the final round. So I'm not going to say
mhm.
that.
Sliding doors moment.
That
Yeah.
guy got railroaded by the AFL as a scapegoat so then they didn't have to take the responsibility for the fact that technically the umpire did the rules perfectly correctly.
Mhm,
Because everybody says, well, can't you do a review? You can review goals. There's nothing in the rules that says you review a behind. And if the umpire doesn't ask for the review, there is no review unless the umpire asks for the review. Neither happened. So your review question that would have happened in that never would have happened because the goal umpire made the decision, which is what
Mm,
they're screaming at the goal umpires to do now. Well, why'd you stand the guy down then?
mm,
The guy did exactly what you asked him to do. He screwed up. Congratulations. You know what? We all do that. I mean, are you telling that I can go into a McDonald's and pay attention? And if a guy puts a pickle in the wrong place, I should be able to scream at him, you're doing something wrong? I mean,
mm,
there has to be a little bit of common sense a little bit with this. I understand why the goal umpires are a little bit aggrieved because they don't want to lose their job. They don't want to
mm,
be stood down. They don't want to miss being able to do their job. So eat the burger that the AFL has given you, AFL media. You have to
mm,
because it's their fault. If they don't stand this umpire down, I don't think you have nearly the goal reviews or behind reviews this year because they're scared. They don't want to be that mistakes. And then my favorite part about it is if they do is exactly as you say. Just make the call. Well, what if they make a mistake? What's going to happen in the media? You guys are going to lose your proverbial shit on this umpire if he does.
and you start
So
asking
they're in
why
a
he didn't
no-win
review it.
they're in a no-win
Yeah.
situation. If they review
Mm,
to make sure they get it right, you complain it's taking too much time. If they do what you're asking them to do, if they make a mistake, you hang them out to dry.
mm,
It's a no-win situation. I understand. Okay. I understand. We're all fans. We're all going to get mad. The umpires are not perfect. I don't want them to be because it's impossible. It is
mm,
impossible. And if they called everything to the letter of the law, there's going to be a 10 times the free kicks that are already in the game. So
mm,
it's going to happen. Is it controversial? Yes. Is Fremantle screwed? For the most part, yes. Is it the touch that screwed them? No. It's the
mm,
dissent call and the controversy of did he hear it? Did he not hear it? I think the adjudication should, if you're going to give him the dissent free kick, it should be at midfield. It should
yeah.
not be in front of
From
the
the
goal.
center circle.
If
Yeah,
you're going to
that
give the
was
dissent
yeah.
free kick, which I understand, somebody cussed at somebody. Again, there's still so much controversy on what's actually happened. And I've heard the referee's mic thing, and even that doesn't really tell me where this supposed cussing came from. I'm not 100% sure. If you're going to give the free kick, it's got to be at midfield. It cannot be in front of the goal again because you
Mm,
have literally then changed the ending of the game. At least if you give it the midfield, an intercept mark by Fremantle could then be taken down the field and they still have at least a shot. You give them a second kick at goal, it's a 10-point game. And now Fremantle literally has to be absolutely centimeter perfect. And I just don't know if it was going to happen because Carlton would have found a way to push the wings back, went 8 deep in the defense, pushed their half forwards back, and they would have been able to congest the game out. So it sucks it ended the way it did.
yeah. You
It's
never
but
want
it's
to see
gonna
yeah.
but here's the thing. Ask tons of American fans over here. Ask New Orleans Saints fans. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Okay.
Exactly.
The thing that I understand, the thing that I say it here is if you're going to be a sports fan, you're going to have to understand there are going to be missed calls. I mean, I'm watching collegiate basketball over here, and there are people losing their minds over a women's basketball game that ended on an illegal screen. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Which
mean, oh my gosh, how many people lost their minds over that? So it's
mm,
going to happen. People are going to make mistakes, whether it's right
mm,
or it's wrong. It doesn't really matter in the long run because unless you're going to grab the whistle and become an umpire, all you're doing is complaining to something that's not really listening.
mm. Particularly in these things, because constructive criticism of officiating is good, but
Yeah.
problem is the focus usually goes on things that isn't the actual issue, which is frustrating because there's so many fans that could just key in on like the popular beatdown rather than actually the issue at hand, which is
Mhm.
so yeah. And like you said, all the sports have it. I'm wearing Oregon Ducks gear right now. I was at the Pac-12 championship last year, and I was walking out of that Allegiant Stadium in Vegas, swearing my head off about some missed calls, but
Mhm.
but it's just it is part of the cross you bear as a sports fan, and you just
Mhm.
hope. And the league does want to get it right. They're not out there,
There's not some big controversy. There's no
yeah,
conspiracy theories about a certain team winning and all that. I mean,
yeah,
as much as some people might say there's a Victorian conspiracy theory, I don't think they try, but sometimes it may seem like it. We'll
yeah.
say we'll state it
It
that
is
way.
actually just players, just like good players get caught. Like it is kind of like the NBA. LeBron James will get away with a little bit more than the eighth guy on the Portland Trail Blazers will. Like it's just like there
Hmm.
is players that and that's the same in any sport, and it's just part of it. Like it is that's just part of it, and it's part of why we love it too. And
Hmm.
I've seen plenty of court players over the years. I felt aggrieved, but also at times you see them get away with a little bit here and there. So it's just
Hmm.
yeah, if you go through your life, if you did like a this is your life of refereeing moments or umpiring moments in all your sports teams, you'd go through and probably feel like it actually turns out to be pretty 50-50, more or less. Maybe some give and take here and there, but
It all just
yeah,
depends on how nuffy you are. Like that, this
yeah,
legitimately, if you're a huge nuffy, sometimes you can blind yourself to the calls that your
mm,
team does get. And so I try to be as 50-50 as possible. And many people know I don't complain about the umpires. In none of my tweets will you see me go, the umpires cost us the game. I never
mm,
do that because there's always a little thing in part of me that I can find a way to not blame somebody, but have a reasoning for why I think a loss happened in there. So
mm,
we won't stay on this again. All the controversy again. I understand it. Fremantle fans, again, I love you guys to death. I understand your grievance. The good thing is it's happened early. So
mm,
it's over with. We can work from that on that. Again, like I said, incredible performance. There's nothing to hang your hat on. Would you prefer the 4 points? Absolutely. But you know what? It's the way you just don't get the rub of the green. So we will
yeah,
jump to a more positive one. And again, as you being from South Australia, I gotta ask this.
mm,
Gather Round again was fantastic. I've heard a
yeah.
lot of people talking about this. Should this be permanently in South Australia, or should we find a way to play it in Perth out in Western Australia, or even instead of doing round zero, do a gather round in, say, Brisbane or Sydney?
I am a parochial South Australian at times, and I will say I think it's just we've taken it by the reins and proven that it works in South Australia. South Australia is literally our license plates. It's changed now, but they used to say like you had to have a slogan on
Hmm.
your car license plates. And South Australia is I was growing up. It says the festival state. It is a state that's always been just unique in the fact we get around. We have the Fringe. We have a mad march with the Fringe. We used to have the Clipsal 500, the motor race.
Hmm.
Back 1985 through 1994, we had the F1 there. And if you listen to a lot of the drivers that drove back then, they said Adelaide was one of the best. We're talking F1, and they loved Adelaide. Murray Walker, the legendary, um, you know, uh, RIP, Murray Walker, the legendary F1 commentator, used to love coming to Adelaide. He was still coming there, even in his retirement, doing some stuff with the motor race down there. And it's a state that the city itself, little history lesson for a moment. It's the only free settled city in the country, and it was a planned city. If you go Google Maps and look at a top down view of Adelaide, its grid layout with the parklands around it, everything is built to have this kind of festival of the footy, and obviously Adelaide Oval being right in the centre of those parklands, and the way South Australia kind of being one of those real bastions of Australian football outside of obviously the Victorian centre of it. It just works there, and it's central to things. People from Perth, it's the shortest flight they can get for the next major city. People from Melbourne can drive. A lot of people I noticed. I was just following the socials and seeing, all the different, footy influencers, and I say that in a positive way. I'm just saying like
Hmm.
people that have a popular following on social media with footy content. They were driving over. Some flew over, but plenty drove over. Did an 8 hour drive. I've done that drive a bunch of times myself. It's a very easy drive. And it just works in South Australia, and it's the way that Malinauskas has got around it and made it truly this unique thing. And yeah, I just can't imagine it working the same way in Sydney. Like I said, the unique nature of how Adelaide is laid out works. If you go and out like the next year, they've announced we're getting one in the Barossa Valley, which is where
Hmm.
I'm from, Lindock. I know a guy that lives right next to Lindock Oval. I drive through the parking lot of Lindock Oval to drop him off at his house after port games in the past. And that ground is now getting an AFL footy game. So I need to get in contact with him to see if we're going to be able to see the game from his front yard. because that'll be the spot that I post up with a couple of beers if I head over there for it. But um, that's an hour outside of the CBD, and whereas if you can't go an hour outside of Sydney and get to one of the top five wine regions in the world. That's what the
Mhm.
Barossa is one of the premier wine regions of the world. You can't go that far. You can't do, and in good traffic, it's less than an hour. You can't do that in Sydney. You can't do that. I don't know Perth as well, but I just think just the unique nature of how Adelaide is set up and the premier regions, obviously the Adelaide Hills this year and last year, the regions that are so close by that can be utilised, and obviously the Sandford grounds in Norwood being used well as well. It's just there is no other city that's set up outside of obviously Melbourne, which Melbourne gets enough anyway. So um, yeah, I just think Adelaide is uniquely set up, and South Australia as a whole is uniquely set up, and we've taken it. We've made it. The gather round concept came up, and then South Australia won the bid for it, I guess, and the work they've put in to make it what it is. You see all the comments on social media from people that have come from outside of South Australia that probably don't have much knowledge of what South Australia was, and they were just there's so many people on social media saying, "Yeah, this is the spot for it," and they weren't South Aussies; they were from Victoria, they were from wherever else they come in. They were saying, "Yeah, this is incredible," and obviously Adelaide Oval is a world class stadium. In cricket terms as well, but it's become a world class stadium in obviously Australian rules football with what they did with the redevelopment 10 years ago. So yeah, I can't see it anywhere else. Did that answer your question?
Yeah,
How South was I very South Australian nuffy
I,
there?
I to be honest with you, I've heard several, and again, I saw that announcement that the Barossa Valley is going to get it. It's going to be fun to see, can they get that oval up to constructed and fully done in a year. It'll definitely be
Hmm.
fun. But I have a hard time disagreeing with you just because of the pure fact that the first one in 4 months they put together was absolutely fantastic. This year again with a full year of planning was even better. And
Hmm.
I agree with you, like it is that central part. And with kind of them doing this opening round this year up in Sydney, and I kind of made this statement at the start of the year. I said, honestly, I said, you want to know the best way to kind of uncomplicate opening round is instead of just making it the four northeastern state teams with a few of the big Victorians, is make that round one.
Hmm.
Okay, give everybody two buys. Okay, so to shut up Chris Scott on the two buy complaint, which again I still have not figured out how it's really disadvantaged the other teams. We'll have to see as the season goes on. Again, we're still early, but instead of doing opening round as just that, is do it like this. Still make it 9 rounds. Okay,
Hmm.
play the primetime games for Friday and Saturday night as either Brisbane, Sydney, GWS, or Gold Coast. Have the last game of the night up in the northeastern states, but play other games in WA or in Victoria or in South Australia. Like for me, almost have opening round be 8 Victorian teams leave the state and only have
Hmm.
one Victorian team back home. So then the Victorians at least get one game. Okay. And again, some Victorian people are going to be absolutely ticked off, but I don't really care in this situation because the whinging, and we'll talk about that in the last one. In the last question is that have GWS Melbourne, have GWS Collingwood, have Sydney Melbourne, have Brisbane Carlton, have Gold Coast and Richmond, then have Fremantle v Geelong, have a West Coast v Essendon, have Port Adelaide v I'm trying to think out who I haven't said, like the Western Bulldogs, fight away, and then have like Collingwood and somebody else in Victoria play at the G for
Yeah,
like one of the
Collingwood,
first
Carlton.
like one of the
Yeah.
first games exactly, or have, since everybody complains like it's the first game, have them let them play Carlton Richmond as the first game on Thursday, and then have
Hmm.
Friday and Saturday the two games at the end of the night, kind of the primetime games, be GWS Sydney or GWS Brisbane, and then Gold Coast Sydney. So then
Hmm.
you put them in the best spot when it comes to highest amount of visuals, but you still get everybody to play. So
Hmm.
it's a way. So then what you could do is opening round has that, gather round in South Australia. You suffice the WA guys by maybe making sure that they play at home. So both of the games out west. So maybe there's only one game in Victoria or two, and then split the SA teams 1-1, or have both the SA teams, because they get gather round at home, have both the SA teams play in Victoria, both WA teams play at home, both Queensland teams play at home, both New South Wales teams play at home. That way, everybody's happy. Probably not. Somebody's going to find a way to whinge, but hey, it's an idea. It's an idea.
Mm,
So, so
yeah.
originally I was going to ask you this next question, but I think it's ridiculous, and I think a lot of people have already kind of poo-pooed this. And there was rumors flying around about a three gather round system, and I kind of agree. I think it's an overkill. So
Oh, so
I'm going to throw it away. Yeah,
yeah.
there was a three-way gather round where they got opening round up at the northern states, gather round for you guys, and then like a third one maybe in WA. And I'm like, that's just stupid. So we will skip
Yeah.
that one. I think that one's
Dumb
kind
as
of a
shit.
waste.
Not worth the time. Yeah.
And then as a loyal South Australian, I have to have your opinion on this. And Lee Matthews again, I know he coached up in Brisbane, but he had a very Melbourne centric answer for something, and that is, do you think it should be a requirement that gather round should be one of the showdowns, because there's no reason why the Adelaide teams get an extra home game? And I will let you have a soapbox, sir. Please have fun with that.
Oh, Lee Matthews, who famously was a coach that had to deal with the one final at the MCG a week rule back in the day, and Brisbane had to play a home final back in 2004. One of their home prelim, home in quotation marks, was at the MCG because Port got to play their home final at Adelaide Oval Footy Park back in the day, um, because they were obviously the top finishing team. I don't understand his. I mean, I know he's talking about it not just in a Victorian lens. He's talking about all the teams that have to come to South Australia. It's ridiculous because we travel every week. The notion that we get one little bit of benefit in April out of having an extra home game is ludicrous, and it's already been proven to be wrong because it's entirely based on form. Obviously, Port beat Essendon handedly because we're just simply the better team. And then Adelaide lost to Melbourne, and Melbourne actually had a really, really good couple of weeks in Adelaide. Um, it's to cheapen the showdown by making it a spectacle. And I've had a few Twitter comments, people, and I assume they're Victorian, saying, "Oh no, it makes complete sense. What's the downside? You get international travellers in to see the showdown. If international, interstate, maybe some international, but if an interstate fan wants to come and see the showdown, they can come and see it any. There's two of them a year. They can come and see it any time. But do not cheapen our. That rivalry is intense. It is
Mm-hmm.
one of the most intense, most hate filled, and I say that in a positive way, but there is a lot of deep seated hate between our two teams. It is its own unique thing, and it's its own unique economy outside of the gather round. The two games a year that we have at Adelaide Oval with the showdown home and away for both teams are the most attended games of the year. Obviously, when if Port are in the top four, or the Crows are in the top four, and they're playing a big team on a Friday night, they're going to get crowds. But if both teams are thereabouts and not great, the game that's going to still get the crowds is the showdown. It becomes its own economy in of itself at the ground. So if you take one of those away and make it part of the gather round, then it takes away one. And then if you add a third showdown in, which is just, you might as well say the AFL is a complete entertainment product and not actually sportingly competitive, because any team playing three times against another team is just a ludicrous proposition, because we
Mm-hmm.
can't even get a competition that everyone plays each other twice. So it's and to think that there's disadvantage to any other teams coming in is just it's one weekend in April. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we're talking at the back end of the season. It's one weekend in April. You're still getting your bye weeks in. There's no if there's just no evidence to this being an advantage for anyone really, or a disadvantage to anyone. It's just an away weekend in the early parts of the season, and there's whinging that's happening, and Lee Matthews getting on his soapbox. Like I've got a lot of respect for him. Obviously, he's a legend of the game, but I was just fuming when I saw him just have to get on, because I'm just like, you've been a part of the mechanics that make this league so Victorian centric. Because if Gather Round was in Melbourne, we wouldn't be having this discussion because there wouldn't be enough heat around it. But
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much Victorian centric nature to the media, anytime
Yep.
something happens good outside of Victoria, It's
There's
just a
whinging in
subconscious bias
Victoria.
that they
Yep.
have to talk about it. Yeah, and it's just ridiculous.
I,
And we've seen the fans all about it. Like that's the thing. The punters are all full gather around in South Australia. You
mhm.
don't see that many complaining about it. Maybe
Yeah.
on the fringes, but overall, people have been all about it. And so
Mhm.
it's only because they need something to talk about, I think. And then some, obviously, Chris Scott's had some weird thoughts about it, which is just, that's
I'm
that's his prerogative. But yeah,
let me hop,
yeah,
let
yeah.
me
No,
hop
you
in here. I'm
yeah,
one of those where
calm me
I
down.
no, 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 no. I completely agree with you because I'm one of those, I heard somebody say it the first year, and I agree. You can't really you can't really keep more of South Australia entertained if you do the showdown because most likely you're going to be doing it on Friday night. Okay.
Mm,
Well, then why would other South Australians want to come to any of the other games? Because the big game's already over with. And that game, as you said, it is so heated. I remember I sat down with Woodville West Torrens coach Big Sauce Sam Jacobs, who played for Adelaide. And
mm-hmm,
I asked him, I said, is the showdown undervalued in the footy media? And he said yes. And I completely agree. I have friends on both sides of this particular argument. I take Switzerland with this with both of you because I respect both sides. I think both sides are great. But I love the passion. I absolutely love the passion from both sides. There is banter. There's absolute sledging on both sides. It's absolutely
mm,
magnificent. And I think I agree with you. It diminishes that rivalry because somebody's losing their home game to play it
mm,
there. They're still getting it, but they're losing it because it's not just them. There isn't
yeah,
just this buildup of the vitriol between you guys because when it's a regular week, you have a week to build up to it. There's this all the vitriol with Gather Round, you've got the buildup of everybody's coming. So
and
it's not
also,
really the
yeah,
same thing. So like I 100% agree with you. And it was like, and then as a fellow non-Victorian club supporter, is like my
mm-hmm,
favorite part about it, and I completely agree with you. Anything outside of Victoria, there's a problem when it comes to, and I've had this discussion with a few friends of mine. It's like the academy systems up in the Northeast. Every single time an academy player for Sydney or GWS or Gold Coast or Brisbane gets drafted, oh my God, do the Victorians whinge and suck about it all day long. And the biggest thing I say is, do Victorian people, are they worried about the storm taking their players?
mm,
No. Okay. You don't have a problem with people stealing it. Then my favorite part, I heard an interview, Chris Scott. Well, there's 5 million people. Okay. Yeah. And do you have, are the NRL snatching your players from Victoria or South Australia or WA? No, you
mm,
don't. So your argument loses a lot of its luster because you don't have the problem that the NRL that AFL has with the Northeastern teams because of the NRL. Sydney
yeah,
just lost a kid from their academy to an NRL team this last year. One of their top kids, a 17-year-old guy, has an NRL contract. That's the one thing that Sydney has to deal with. And then my other favorite is like, well, it's such a handout. Remind me, how many premierships do Brisbane, Gold Coast, GWS, and Sydney have since most of those academies have been started?
we're talking.
None.
So
None.
the academy started after your 2012 one, right? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. That's what I
I
was.
could.
That's the only thing I was thinking.
Yep,
I think
that's
it's
the only
done, but I
one. That's
didn't.
the
Yeah,
only
yeah.
of those three teams.
Mm,
The only premiership in the last 20, the only premiership has been the 2012 Sydney Swans, and that was before the
yeah,
academy was begun. So again,
and
this great advantage that Sydney is supposed to have or Brisbane's supposed to have, it's just not there. The facts I saw somebody put out this, there's been over 2,500 kids that have come through the Sydney Swans Academy. It's just Sydney Swans. Okay, I know it's a little
mm,
Sydney Swans, but this is the facts that most people don't want.
mm,
2,500. Okay. You want to know how many kids have actually played a game of AFL that have come through the Swans Academy? 15. You want to know how
yeah,
many are actually with the Swans currently? Five. That's it. Five.
yeah,
Now, are they five big names? Yes, I will give you credit with that. Isaac Keeney, Callum Mills, Nick Blakey, Errol Goulden, and Brendan and Braden Campbell. Those
mm.
are the five.
But
Are
then
they
look
all
at
really good? Absolutely. but it isn't the handout that people think it is. So I know soapbox there. I'm sorry, but
No, no, I
it
appreciate that
goes
because
with
that's
you
yeah.
is that the Victorian centric that you're finding something to whinge about that I just don't think it is. And the other thing is that I hear people say, well, it's a compromise competition if you do this. I said,
Oh, for
are
fuck's
you
sake!
seriously
Sorry,
talking about are you seriously talking? No, go ahead and drop it. I don't care.
yeah.
Are you seriously talking about compromise competition? Are you really kidding me? Because the fact that Geelong doesn't get to play home games in the finals,
Mhm.
that right there ends all your arguments for any Victorian. The fact that Geelong does not play any home games usually in the finals because the AFL wants to maximize revenue, so they make Geelong play a home game against Collingwood or Melbourne, who that's their home ground.
Mm.
That's a real even competition. No offense. Like
Yeah.
I just don't understand that argument, which is rich coming from again, when Chris Scott complains about certain things, I'm like, dude, you literally don't understand. Like you're in a club that literally is getting hosed a lot of times because you should be hosting 11 games at GMHBA Stadium, yet you're only hosting 8 because 3 games have to be up at the MCG because, oh yeah, you're playing Collingwood, you're playing Essendon, and you're playing Richmond.
Yeah.
Are you
That rich
are
that
you kidding
Richmond
me?
dynasty was aided by the fact that they could, whenever Geelong were playing them in a big game, it was up at Richmond's home ground, even if it was a Geelong home game. It has
Yep.
always been a compromised competition in that sense. Again, I brought up the Brisbane having to play their home prelim at the MCG, which just no one really. I remember it being a bit of a thing then, but no one talks about it now. It's just like, yeah, it's always been this way. And
Hmm.
the one more thing I wanted to say about, I got two things because you brought up something that I wanted to say too, but
Sure.
gather round, the essence of gather round is a celebration of footy, right? It's meant to be good vibes.
Yep.
You're not going to have good vibes if you've got Crows and Port fans tense for a week leading into a showdown.
Hmm.
We don't enjoy, like, we enjoy it. But I mean, maybe just speaking from personal experience, I enjoy it. I also hate it because it is so tense. It is so full of passion
And
and
stress.
sometimes, yeah, stress, misplaced aggression. Um, just all those, just some PTSD popping up, all the things gather around the fact that the way they've fixtured it the last few years, you're playing, it's still a game for premiership points. So it's
Hmm.
stressful, but it is overall a celebration of footy. There's none of that angsty rivalry stuff. Obviously, the Hawthorn game had that interesting side note with Ginnivan, but it's still just a
That was a
celebration
cork.
thing. And yeah, but so it's just going to change the whole vibes of it, and it doesn't make
Hmm.
sense. So
I
yeah,
agree.
that's all on that. The other thing I thought it was interesting you bring up the academy stuff because no one ever says because when it's Peter Dacos and his two kids going to Collingwood
Collingwood.
and which I love the father son rule. It's
I
not
do
an
too.
against
Absolutely love it.
against
Think
of
it's
that,
magnificent.
but that's their academy in a sense is that they've got such a steep generational history of families going through Collingwood Football Club, good big families going through there. They've just got they do not win that premiership last year without the fact that Peter Dacos played footy there 20, 30 years ago.
Hmm.
30 years ago.
Well, and
So it's just
the other
like,
thing
so
too, you
yeah,
also have is a lot of Victorian kids find the excuse of they get drafted by an interstate school, and then they have the homesickness all of a sudden
yeah,
becomes an issue,
which we've
and
benefited from as well. But yeah,
exactly, and that's the thing I was saying is like WA and SA have had the same thing where it's like New South
mm,
Wales doesn't exactly have a lot of footy players, so the go home factor doesn't go in. So it's another
yeah,
thing that I think I've had a few discussions with people, and again, I understand your passion and not liking it, but it's also there also comes as you speak, you also kind of show a little bit of an ignorance because you're saying something that's like, Adelaide Crows don't have any father sons. Yeah, you do. You have father sons. Michaelini is a father son.
mm,
Anybody that plays in the sandful for a certain amount of time could be father son. None of them have boys.
mm,
Like look at Aaron Phillips is a female. If Aaron was a male, he could have been father son to Port Adelaide.
mm,
He had a daughter. So it's like
yeah,
there's some arguments that you have like I understand, but you're not seeing the issue of is that what you're complaining about is that a state that doesn't have regular footy is producing good footy players and you're not happy about it.
mm.
Like that's literally your argument. So again, I'm
And let's be
100% with
and
you.
let's
I'm
be real.
100% with you. And I think I agree that you can't have a big rivalry for Gather Round. Gather Round has to be It's about the footy. Let the teams kind of play. Don't ever get rivalries, which is interesting because some people say, well, West Coast and Sydney could have been a rival. Well, that was back in 05, 06, so not
Yeah.
really. So the Hawthorne Collingwood one was a quirk. But if you really look at
Mm,
it, none of the games from last week had any vitriol to them. They were all just matchups.
mm,
So I love the way they did that. I disagree with Lee. I understand it, but I almost feel like I think a Victorian producer probably convinced him of that, and he said it. I don't honestly think he probably believes it. He just said it because he's in Victorian media. That's my personal opinion, but
mm.
again, I don't know. But
Yeah, there is a lot of
I
storyline
just
stuff that they have to find stuff to talk about. So
I
yeah.
just didn't like it. It
Mm,
looks bad. Normally, I 100% with Lee. I agree with Lee in a lot of stuff, but
mm,
this was just one. I was just like, yeah, you're a little bit off the mark on this, Lee. Lethal. I love you, buddy. You're incredible, but I think you missed the mark on this one. So
mm.
now that we've had our fun, we've had our soapbox moments. We'll kind of wrap this up a little bit. We'll go to my team of the week that I do every week. We'll try to do this quick because I know sometimes
I'm excited
podcasts
for
over an
this.
hour are always fun. So, all right, we'll start with the defenders. We'll start off with the Adelaide Crows. Mark Keane, I thought he was fantastic in this game. Gave a couple
Mm,
of free kicks away. I was a little frustrated, but I thought he was magnificent. Charlie Comben of the North Melbourne Roos. I think that game could have got even worse if he wouldn't have had a great game down back. And Jacob Wiedering from Carlton, again, another one of those. He stood up really big when Fremantle kept pushing, kind of kept
mm,
Carlton in that game. On the halfback lines, he's Nick Blakey of the Sydney Swans, Geelong's Max Holmes. He'd kind of pushed back a little bit, wasn't on the wings as much this round. And then Riley Bonner of the St. Kilda Saints. On the wings, we see
love that.
Sam Closty of the Gold Coast Suns. The young rookie comes in, had a really good game. Sydney's
Mm,
Errol Goulden in the center sees your Port Adelaide's Connor Rosie, Sydney Swans Isaac Heaney, and GWS's Stephen Canelio. In the ruck sees St. Kilda's Rowan Marshall. On the forward line sees Brisbane's Joe Danaher, Richmond's Shea Bolton, and Hawthorn's Blake Harwick. I know he's normally a defender, but he pushed forward and kicked four
mm.
goals. So going to throw him in the forward line. Full forward sees GWS's Jesse Hogan, Geelong's Tyson Stinkle, and and I think I meant to put something else, and I put Jesse Hogan in there twice. So we will skip that. Live podcasting sometimes can be a lot of
You'd love to
fun.
have. I mean, you'd love to have two
Toby
Jesse
Green,
Hogans, wouldn't
Toby
you?
Green.
Toby Green. There
I
you go.
knew it
There you
was
go.
Toby
Yeah.
Green from G. I knew it was two from GWS.
Yeah.
So, all right, we go to the bench. Sees Essendon's Nick Martin. The ruck is Richmond's Toby Nankervis. The midfielder is Jack Bowes from the Geelong Cats, and the final forward is Brisbane's Eric Hipwood. I know that's a lot of names really quickly, and especially my stuff up when it comes to forgetting Toby Green. How do you forget Toby Green? I don't know, but your thoughts
There's a
really
few.
quickly on that.
Yeah, very well balanced side. My parochial Port
Or
Adelaide man will say where the goddamn hell was Jason Horn Francis, but team of the weeks. You're trying to pick. I know how you build your team of the weeks as well. You try to
Well,
um
Connor was it? Connor
be
had three, Isaac Heaney had two, Cornelio had two, and Bose had two. So it
yeah.
made it a little bit easier because if you get like if everybody kicks one, it's like you swear you're slicing through microscopic hairs to try to
Mhm.
decide on that one.
Yeah,
So
and that's where Horn Francis had one of those weekends where he was really dominant through the middle, but didn't hit the scoreboard. So,
yeah,
and
I
yeah, but
mean
yeah,
they
no, I
Libator.
yeah,
I wanted to get Libatorian and so bad because of 19 clearances. I mean that was absolutely ridiculous. But it's
mm,
the fact that it was Bont, it was Trelaw, it was everybody else around him were kicking
there was
goals,
a
and
lot of
so he
there
was
was a
kind
lot of
of the
good performances
facilitator.
over the weekend.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, there was a lot of yeah,
it was absolutely insane. I
yeah.
like it was the midfielding when I was doing it, even the wings. There were some wings that had some really good games. So
Mm. I
it
like that you
was
got a Riley Bonner in there. He was much maligned at Port Adelaide at times, but he's
he's found
he
himself a niche at
yeah,
St. Kilda.
and
He's really fit well into what they're doing now.
yeah, and he had some good performances at Port Adelaide too. Unfortunately, he just probably didn't nail down a spot in a side that was pretty hard to find a spot sometimes. So,
Yep. Well, when
but yeah, no,
You got Dan Houston running off that halfback line with his kick the way it is, Riley Bonner just really couldn't fit in. So
I love that man in a very unhealthy way. Dan Houston, what a gem.
Alrighty, so let's go to it. I know we're early. I know teams won't be coming out for a couple of days, but we got to do it.
Mm,
We got to tip round five. So we do have two buys. Collingwood and Sydney are not playing. They're off this week. So let's start at Thursday night. Footy sees the fun matchup at the MCG as the Melbourne Demons host the Brisbane Lions. Can Brisbane get their season going. Melbourne, Brisbane, who do you got?
I think I've got Melbourne. I think they've just ticking along nicely, and I am yet to be convinced by Brisbane in any performance they've had. They're shaky within games. They can't like, and whereas Melbourne are very defensively solid, and I think they'll be probably licking their lips to be back home after a very, very good 2 weeks away.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be they're just sitting there so comfortably, not dealing with too many issues injury wise. I don't think. Obviously, Stephen May aside, but he still played and played well. So he's
And
just
Oliver's finger.
a RoboCop, I think. Yeah, and Oliver's yeah, but they've got so many other guys that have popped
Yep.
up and making an impact as well. So
Yeah.
I just can't go past Melbourne in this one. Brisbane again, unknown quantity for me at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if Brisbane got up, but I just don't see them getting up, if that makes sense.
MCG, I'm going to give Melbourne a little bit more of a tip. I think Max Gone usually plays really well against Oscar McInerney. I'm one of those. The Brisbane, unfortunately, I think bombs it into their forward line a little bit too much. And when you have May
Mm,
and Lever back there, that's a recipe for disaster. I like the D's in this one, but I think the Lions keep it close. I think this is round 2 goals. I think
mm,
this is a fun one. If Brisbane can get a little bit of center clearance and lower their eyes and find those half forwards and then find a way to go to Danaher and Hipwood, I think they've got a shot. But if you're bombing it in, Lever will intercept all day, and May is good enough. He can take either a Danaher or Hipwood out of the game and make it a little bit harder. So I got the D's
mm.
in that one. We go to the Friday night footy matchup at Marvel Stadium. A fun one here is the Doggies host the Dons. I'm gonna tip the doggies in this one only because I'm a little bit more confident in the doggies going forward against an Essendon defense that has been less than impressive. But
Mm-hmm.
the doggies defense is not exactly filling me with confidence. But I think the midfield depth and skill for the doggies, I think, is going to push me over. So I like the doggies, but I think this one's close.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one as well. Doggies for me. I think I think Essendon just showed a bit of a soft underbelly on the weekend, and that's not being. I'm not trying to be super mean about it. They
Hmm.
did fall apart when our pressure overwhelmed them. And I think the doggies showed some good fight against Geelong, who have started the season pretty well, which was impressive. So that did this weekend was probably the weekend that made me think probably a little bit higher of the doggies as well as the fact that the Essendon are dealing with they're dealing with a bit of a soft tissue injury. I think Archie Perkins is probably going to be out this weekend. I think
Hmm.
so, and they're dealing with a few injuries, so they're just going to be a little bit underdone on that front as well. So, yeah, like you said, probably maybe a bit close, maybe a bit of a slog but yeah, I feel like the Dogs could probably get it done by 4 goals by the time the games run out.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. It'll be an interesting one. That'll be a fun one. We move up to Manuka Oval up in Canberra as GWS host St. Kilda. Who do you like in this one?
I can't go past GWS. Like they're so impressive. They're probably one of those teams this year for me that they're just kind of like I just have like the love heart eyes when I watch them. They're just fun to watch and um, as I said, a little bit of bias with their coach, but they're just playing really good footy at the moment and really seem fundamentally sound. And I think St Kilda showed on the weekend that while I think it'll be could be a bit tough, maybe a bit closer than so. I don't know what the betting. I probably should have looked at the betting lines. I would have been interested to see where the money's going. Not endorsing gambling in any way, but just it's always an interesting way to
I
view
can
how.
tell you right now GWS is a $1.32 favorite over St. Kilda at $3.40.
Yeah, so that's a significant. So that shows a strong favoritism to GWS probably. So I feel like it could maybe be a touch closer than that. But I feel like GWS probably still get the job done up there, and probably by the end of it, probably by 5 6 goals. I have so much trust in what they're doing right now. They seem super full of run and confidence, and just exuding a quiet confidence in what and in their game style as well, which is when a team is confident in their game style, it really breeds results as well.
Yeah, I got GWS in this one. I think it's one of those. I think St. Kilda testing themselves against again a little bit of the ground a little bit, but GWS, man, they spread the ground and they always play Canberra really well.
Hmm.
I just think this is one of those. Their defense is so good. Sam Taylor is probably one of the most underrated best fullbacks in the entire competition. There's no way to deny that on this
Hmm.
one. And GWS, they just find a way. Now, I think Cal Wilkie has been fantastic for them. Who does he match up? Does he get the Max King matchup? Does he sit back? Can Higgins get loose? I'm kind of one of those. I'm going to tip GWS. I think St. Kilda stay in this. I think this is
Mm-hmm.
under 3 goals. I think St. Kilda Ross will find a way to kind of be good defensively, so it'll stifle a little bit. The biggest question will be, can Toby Green get loose? Can Hogan get loose? Because if they can start kicking goals, it's gonna hammer that St. Kilda defense. So I like GWS in this one, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it's close. I don't think this is a disaster for St. Kilda. I think they're in this till the fourth quarter for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We jump to Marvel Stadium as Carlton host the hapless Crows. Unfortunately, I will tip the Blues in this one. If the Blues make this game close, it is going to annoy the crap out of me because if you look at form, if you look at how dominant that Carlton forward line is and how undominant Adelaide has been out of the midfield, this could be a setup for a big Carlton win. But if the Crows stay in this one, I'm almost going to kind of look at it and go, are Carlton playing down to their opponents a little bit more than they probably should early in the season?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely 100% agree on that. Between Carlton's kind of midfield group that is just so much more balanced and dominating than what the Crows are putting out in the field together at the moment, at least, and as well as that forward line that Carlton have got, if they should have midfield dominance, that should translate to some good, entries into their forward 50, which just should overwhelm the Crows. And yeah, if it would actually be, if the Crows can keep it within 5 goals, it would almost be a plus for the Crows. Even if they still lose, it would be maybe a sign of progression
Hmm.
for them to be able to maybe, if as long as they can sit there and say with 10 minutes to go, maybe we're in the game, then it would be a big question mark in Carlton's ability to put teams away. And probably a plus for where the Crows are trying to build to, even because you'd already say the Crows are out of the finals race, but they just want to try to find a building block for next season now, and this is the kind of game they could frustrate them. But I would expect, if all being equal, if the Carlton put out a decent effort on the day, then they should be winning by 40 points at least. But at the very least, that's probably baseline for me. And that's not me being a dickhead Port fan. That's just actually just looking at it on paper, basically. So.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. This is one of
Mm,
those, this could get ugly if the Crows can't find a way to attack consistently. They got to put scoreboard pressure on Carlton. They have
mm.
to. If you put scoreboard pressure on Carlton, it could make them ratchet up, and it'd definitely be interesting to watch them. So fun one. Heritage Bank Stadium up at the Gold Coast as Gold Coast take on Hawthorn in this one. Who do you like in this one?
It's an interesting one. I think if you'd asked me like before this weekend, I probably would have been more stronger on Gold Coast. And I think I still am picking the Gold Coast, but I was really impressed with how Hawthorn managed to almost snatch victory from the jaws of defeat against Collingwood. That was a really impressive effort. Shows some signs of life for what Sam Mitchell's trying to build there at Hawthorn. And it could be a little bit closer than some, well, actually, I feel like it could be a bit of a slog. And Gold Coast has certainly got some things going last weekend in a decent effort against a very good GWS team too. So it's an intriguing one, actually. The more as I'm talking about it, I'm talking myself into it being. It's going to be one I might sit up and watch live, just because it's just an intriguing battle of two teams that are trying to find some. Gold Coast maybe a step ahead of where Hawthorn are at the moment, but yeah, I'll pick Gold Coast, maybe 21 points. I have this random thing with tipping when I have to tip a margin. If I'm really not sure, I just pick 21 for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's Lamichael James, which is a deep cut to Oregon running backs in the Chip Kelly era. But yeah, 21 points is my default when I really don't know. So yeah, I'll go with Hawthorn. Sorry, Gold Coast by 21 points. Clearly, I have no idea.
Well, the only thing that's going to be hard for that though is if you want to watch your beloved Port, you're not going to be able to watch that one because they're both on at the same time.
Oh, that's someone say. Well, yeah, clearly then. Yeah, no, I'm
Yep,
not watching. I didn't. Yeah.
it's the rollover both the same time, which kind of stinks because I
Well.
I agree with you. I think this Gold Coast Hawthorne team game, if you would have told me before the week, or if Collingwood result would have been a little bit more lopsided, I would have gone Gold Coast easily, not even thinking about it twice.
Mm,
I think Hawthorne stay in this. Hawthorne again is they're a pesky side that just don't want to quit. I don't think they've got enough defense to be able to stop a Jed Walter, and and a Ben King. I think their talls are going to give them headaches. Gold Coast win this. I think it's below 3 goals. I think this is another one. I think it stays close. Gold Coast just has a little too much talent in just the right places for Hawthorn. But I agree with you. I think this one's closer than some of the experts think. We go
Hmm.
to the game that I know has your heart as much as any, as your Port Adelaide Power host Fremantle. So not only do Fremantle have to come back to the House of Horrors that is the Adelaide Oval after dropping that one to Carlton, but now they get Port Adelaide, who are absolutely in scintillating form. I will have you head or heart on this one. Port, Fremantle, who do you like?
Obviously, I mean, head and heart is Port. If I was completely, it's very hard to try to be objective when you're as died in the Wolf fan as I am, but I do think Frio are a decent team, and we've had some interesting battles against them over the years. They've come, even when they've been in, we've had some interesting battles over there. Um, they've come and created problems when we probably didn't expect it over at Adelaide Oval. Even if we've ended up getting a win, we've had some of those battles where we've had to wait until the fourth quarter to pull away from them in the last few years. So they even made it tough on us at the end of last year when we had to go over there and get a win to kind of just lock in our spot in the top four, I think. So um, they're they're defensively. I think they'll be defensively a little bit more of a problem for us this week than the relatively easy ride we had against Essendon. Jamie made it his spotlight on our podcast last night to watch kind of that mix in the how we manage with that. So, but with our midfield in just this scintillating form it's in, it'll be an interesting battle against a reasonable midfield mix from Frio as well. It's one of those ones that'll be a real good battle to watch for the neutral. Um, but I just think that we're just too. And we've actually got a bit of a selection squeeze coming this weekend as well. We've got Sam Peppers back from suspension this week. Ollie Wines apparently his 1 week hamstring. All signs are pointing that he's going to be back in the mix for selection this week. So we're going to be stronger on paper than we were last week when we put a 69-point win on a pretty what people think is a reasonable Essendon side. So I put it out there in our podcast last night. I think it's going to be one of those ones that I think would be reasonably tough, but we just kind of get away to maybe a few goals lead, and it kind of ends up being goal for goal after we get a bit of a buffer, and it ends up being maybe a 4 to 5 goal win. It's not going to be easy. They're a good team. I just think home field advantage is probably a big one in this. And particularly, it'd be interesting to see how Frio emotionally back up after last week because they're still dealing with the fallout of that game, days later, which is never a good way to lead into your next game week. So, but I trust them as a professional outfit to get themselves up for it. And yeah, it'll be a tough one, but I think we can win by 4 or 5 goals.
I think Port a little bit too good on this one. I think yeah, the biggest question will be is can Longmuir focus this group after, like I said, it sounds like the Western Australian media are absolutely losing themselves over this one. The midfield battle in this one's going to be absolutely insane. Brayshaw, Sarong, Rosie, Butters,
Mm-hmm.
Van. This is absolutely nuts. The biggest question I have is Darcy the Ruck or is Jackson the Ruck? Like that'll be the biggest question. I think if Darcy's the Ruck, it may even out Ivan Soldo's involvement. If it's Soldo v Jackson, I think Soldo's a little bit of a bigger body and I think can kind of beat on Jackson a little bit. And I think that might even out this contest. Port
Mm-hmm.
win this one because I just think they're in fuego form right now. They've got three really good midfielders right now. Fremantle really has two going. The third one is just not really set themselves on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And offensively, it is scary what Port Adelaide can do. Now, you are facing a really good defensive team that did really well against a very good Carlton team. So that would be the only thing that would worry me a tiny bit. But as well as Port Adelaide has done, I think defensively they can shut down Fremantle, which after a couple of players, they're not like super scary. So I like Port
Mm-hmm.
in this one. GMHBA Stadium, I don't think I have to ask. I think the Cats win this one, and I think they win this one big. I think as a fantasy owner currently of Jeremy Cameron, I'm hoping for a big game this weekend from him. So do I have to ask? I mean, my tipping thing that I'm doing, literally, it's 100% Geelong. That's the first time I've ever seen 100% tippers against a team. Like that's the first ever time I've seen that.
Yeah, especially down at GMHBA, they play that ground so well, and obviously they're in rip snorting form. So yeah, I just it's one of those ones that I've got to go through and do my tipping still, but yeah, when I come across it, it'll just be it won't be it. I love those ones when you just go through and go, this is an easy pick because you know everyone in your tipping competition that you're in is picking that same one too. So it's
Hmm.
just like it's not even one that you go because I sometimes try to pick an upset here and there, but that's not going to be one of them. There's no way Geelong lose that game. Um, if they do, I'll drink a beer. Anyone that knows me knows that's not hard to.
It's funny. And then the last one we'll go out to Optus Stadium is Richmond make the fly west out to Optus Stadium to face West Coast. Is there any scare that the Eagles find a way to nip a weakened Tiger side, or are the Tigers just too strong?
This is one of those ones that you can talk yourself into because when a team when it's you brought it up earlier about teams that could potentially go um, without a win in a season. This is one of those ones that you talk yourself into if they do the right things. If Richmond like finally they just walk off that ledge where they just that that cliff comes with their injury crisis and they're a little bit exhausted. I do think Richmond are too good still. I think Richmond we talked about it on our review a few weeks ago when we played Richmond. We said our thought was Richmond is going to be one of those teams that could end up bottom 4 to 6, but isn't a super bad team. Like they're just going to be one of those teams that's not quite good enough to get over the line against some of the good teams. As you obviously had a loss against them. We had a tough game against them where they got back within a goal at 3/4 time, and we had to work hard to make sure to put it away in the fourth quarter. And they made it hard on St Kilda last weekend too. They're making it hard on every team they play. They're just not getting the result. And then conversely, you look at West Coast last week and go, oh, there's some signs of life there, but I don't know if they can quite get the job done. But then it's over in West Coast where it's just like, you know, historically, I know it's not the same coach anymore, but Dimmer Hardwick didn't even like going to Marvel sometimes. So, it's the longest road trip you're going to have as a Melbourne team, and it's an intriguing. But I think Richmond get up by 4 goals or so. Well, they could come out and just demolish them as well. Shy, they've got some, despite the injuries, they've got some guys in ripping form as well. So that are really like carrying the torch for them. So yeah, but I was intrigued by what West Coast put out. West Coast was such a wet squib last year, and the fact that they got let themselves get beaten by 80 to 100 to a fucking was it 100? Sorry, I'm swearing at the end of the podcast. It was 170 points that you guys knocked them off by last year.
Oh, I'd have
Yeah,
to go back. I'd have to go
but yeah,
back and
they're
look.
not
But it
that.
was it was two it was 200 it was 201 to 48 or something. It
Yeah.
was absolutely ridiculous. I
So yeah, I think West
literally
Coast are
could
better
not
than that.
believe it.
Yeah.
Like I remember like I was watching like legitimately watched that game live. And I remember telling a friend of mine, I was like, did that just happen? Like I was in shock
Hmm.
that I saw what I saw and just legitimately sat there for a couple of times for like a couple minutes after the game and went, I'm not sure if I should celebrate this or be insanely
Yeah, like
like
lighting some.
it was the weirdest sensation. I found it 205 to 34. It was an 171 point win.
Geez, I was close. Um, but yeah, so my point being, they're not that team this year. West Coast they're still dealing with a lot of the transition rebuild stuff that they're going to have to with some of the guys that they're going to have to move out in the next couple of years. But obviously, Harley Reid's a big in, and they've got some good youth there. I don't think it's premier youth, but they've got some okay youth to try to carry them through and at least be competitive. But I still think Richmond, despite their injury crisis and all that stuff, they get over there and can win. I think they've shown enough um, fight and maybe some new coach, that new coach energy you get that they can probably go over there and win by 4 goals. I think, but
Mhm.
it's a one to watch as well. I'm really interested to see how West Coast back up a decent effort against your boys this weekend, going back home to play in front of their home fans. If they can kind of take something out of what they did this weekend and make it a battle, it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, it'll definitely be one I'll be definitely keeping an eye on. I'm fascinated by it completely.
Do you
Again,
have the bet? Do you? I know you had the betting odds up there before. Do you have them for that game or? Are you
Let
looking
me
at?
let me pull it up real quick because I just went off of it, but I can pull that. I think it was a little bit closer than some people was. The
Classic
betting
question.
odds for that one are 133 for Richmond, $3.34 for West Coast. So it isn't a huge
Yeah.
margin. Like the biggest one is the Geelong v North. It is $1.03 to $12.50.
Yeah. Not as bad because West Coast had some shocking ones last year that were getting out to 15,
Yeah,
$17 at times. And
because even the
yeah, so
Hawthorne one is $1.22 for Gold Coast, $4.35 for Hawthorne.
that's really interesting. Maybe that shows a lot of confidence that's coming for what Gold Coast are building there. So,
Yeah.
that's good for them. But yeah, that's an interesting one too. But
Yeah, but I think that the tougher game against Sydney has definitely brought people to be a little bit more confident in West Coast. But no, I have
mm,
Richmond too. I think Richmond too. I think in some situations, West Coast they're going to be inconsistent because they are a much younger side. The some of their veterans have left the building, so they are a little bit of a younger side. They're going to go through some headaches. It was nowhere near a perfect game of footy against Sydney. I think it was one of those where they had some lucky bounces. Sydney was sloppy at times, and West Coast made them pay. Will Richmond make that mistake again? This is a Richmond side that is very much they are held together right now by duct tape and super glue as much as possible because they've just got
mm,
so many injuries in the right places. It's one of those, you have a Shai Bolton, you have a Dusty Martin. I think Richmond has enough to beat them. But if you get a good performance from Harley Reid and you get a couple of their forwards like Petrocelli kick a few goals and get some
mm,
confidence and get the crowd involved, anything can happen. I tip Richmond, but I think West Coast is in this a little bit more than
yeah,
some say. So, as per usual, Dave, we talk and we talk and we talk. It's always so much fun. So that is it.
it is.
That's everything that I have. Again, you and I get on podcasts, and I swear we talk for days. It's so much fun. I truly
Mhm.
appreciate it. So, as always, Dave, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today.
Yeah, no, thank you as well. I do. Every time you reach out and say, "Oh, would you like to jump on?" I'm straight away there because I know we just have a good chat, and it's always fun to chat footy with like-minded individuals. And yeah, we do chat our way into some long podcasts, but hopefully it's some good listening for the people out there. Hopefully with some long drives.
Yeah, well, the good thing is that it's never boring because it's always a fun chat. I always agree with
Mm,
that. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. Again, keep track of more coverage. Got a VFL review show coming up very, very soon. The first few rounds of the VFL and VFLW, and then as always, Standful and Waffle still to come for our monthly reviews. That'll be it for today's episode. We'll be back with more footy coverage back in your ears very, very soon.